Chapter 134. I'm surprised. Chiwu Zhongshuan, who was surrounded by 4 guards, didn't wait for Noah and the Elysian sun to come over. He stroked his beard and put his hands behind his back as he spoke these words. I didn't know that the Xingzi of Yodo has the habit of waking people up late at night for a meeting. Hearing this, Xingzi's face was calm, as if he had already expected Chiwu Zhongshuan to ask such a question. He nodded slightly apologetically. I'm very sorry. The decision was made in haste. Please forgive me for my rudeness, President Chiwu. Of course, I won't pursue such a small matter. Although he said so, Chiwu Zhongshuan's face was full of displeasure, showing his mood at this time. Then, Xingzi, can we start the meeting between us? Xingzi nodded and was about to step forward, but a hand suddenly pressed on Xingzi's shoulder, stopping him. Xingzi was stunned, and even Chiwu Zhongshuan frowned. Under the gaze of the 2 supreme rulers of Yodo and Osaka, Noah, who was holding Xingzi's shoulder, stared at Chiwu Zhongshuan until Chiwu Zhongshuan's face became a little ugly. Then Noah spoke indifferently. Xingzi, how about leaving this meeting to me? President Noah. Xingzi was stunned, and he couldn't react for a long time. Obviously, he was extremely shocked that Noah would say such a thing. You? Chiwu Zhongshuan was also stunned for a moment, but after he reacted, he immediately laughed out loud, but there was a hint of anger in his voice. Who are you? What qualifications do you have to stand up and talk to me? Identity. Noah did not say anything. He just cast a sarcastic look at Chiwu Zhongshuan for less than a second, which reminded Chiwu Zhongshuan of the last time when they talked about identity. Chiwu Zhongshuan's face darkened even more. Chiwu Zhongshuan did not say anything. In this regard, Noah didn't say anything. While Xingzi was still in a daze, he stepped forward and stared at Chiwu Zhongshuan. I won't beat around the bush, Chiwu Zhongshuan. The mastermind behind the assassination of Xingzi is you, right? The air suddenly froze. Saint Child looked at Noah in disbelief. He had not expected Noah to say something like that in front of Chiwu Zhongshuan. Chiwu Zhongshuan's dignified face had long stiffened. The muscles on his face kept twitching. Obviously, he was caught off guard by Noah. In fact, as long as one was not a fool, one could more or less guess that the mastermind behind the assassination of the Holy Son of Heaven was Chiwu Zhongshuan, who wanted to occupy this country and become the overlord of the world. However, it would be foolish to question him directly in front of the ruler of a region without any evidence. The 4 guards around Chiwu Zhongshuan were already looking at Noah with disdain. Even the Holy Son of Heaven was a little anxious. Only Chiwu Zhongshuan, who had fully experienced Noah's strength in the last meeting, could not help but feel a chill in his heart. While secretly feeling that something was wrong, he glared at Noah. Officer, are you slandering me? Slandering? Noah approached Chiwu Zhongshuan step by step. Undoubtedly, his pair of dark eyes were very calm, but Chiwu Zhongshuan felt unusually oppressed and could not help but take a step back. You know best whether it's slander or not, don't you? You. The muscles on Chiwu Zhongshuan's face twitched again. Around Chiwu Zhongshuan, the 4 guards in black suits had already pulled out their guns, aimed at Noah, and shouted coldly in unison. Stop. If you come any closer, we'll shoot you for attempting to harm the regional president. Unfortunately, Noah did not even look at them. He still stared at Chiwu Zhongshuan and approached step by step. President Noah. The poor Holy Son of Heaven did not expect things to develop to this point. He stood there anxiously. The 4 guards of Chiwu Zhongshuan had anger and murderous intent in their eyes, and they directly pulled the triggers of their guns. Bang! In the simultaneous gunshots, 4 bullets pierced through the air and violently shot toward Noah, who was gradually approaching. However, almost at the same time, a faint sound broke through the air from Noah's body. Then, Noah's figure became somewhat illusory. The 4 bullets pierced through Noah's illusory figure. No. It was not just pierced. The bullets that penetrated Noah's illusory body seemed to be like a mortar that blew away the fog, directly hitting the figure in front of it. That was, impressively, an afterimage. Whoosh! Immediately, a gust of wind blew past the 4 guards who were shooting with their guns. The next moment, it turned into a figure and appeared in front of Chiwu Zhongshuan. Chiwu Zhongshuan was suddenly shocked and wanted to retreat, but the tie in front of him was grabbed by a hand and pulled forward. Phew! Chiwu Zhongshuan suddenly made a depressed sound, and his body was involuntarily pulled forward by the tie. Grand President. The 4 guards were shocked and screamed aloud. They put their guns in front of Chiwu Zhongshuan, who was protected in the middle by them. Seeing Chiwu Zhongshuan being pulled up by his tie, they did not dare to act rashly and were a little flustered. Chiwu Zhongshuan, I'll make it clear to you. Don't expect me to show you any evidence. Noah directly grabbed Chiwu Zhongshuan's tie, pulled him up, and pulled him in front of him, and said sarcastically, "Now that I have confirmed that you are the mastermind behind this, just like what I said last time, even if I kill you now, I will still live well. Why should I look for any evidence? You. I." Chiwu Zhongshuan's face turned purple and he was lifted up by Noah. His toes began to leave the ground. He wanted to say something, but because of suffocation, he could only squeeze out a painful sound. This made the 4 guards even more anxious. They roared to warn and bluff, which made Noah, who was already in a bad mood, even more impatient. "Don't say that I didn't give you a chance." Noah pulled Chiwu Zhongshuan's tie with great force and threw him to the side. Chiwu Zhongshuan's body completely lost balance and fell to the side with Noah's action. With a bang, he hit the ground and screamed out in pain. What I like most is to use the same means to repay people who play tricks in front of me. Noah looked disdainfully at Chiwu Zhongshuan, who fell to the ground, and said in a condescending tone, "Since you want to assassinate the Holy Son of Heaven, I will do the same to you. So, from now on, I will give you an hour to escape. After an hour, I will catch up with you. If you can escape from the Tokyo area, I will stop. If you can't..." Noah's eyes flashed with a cold light that made Chiwu Zhongshuan's heart palpitate. "Then your daydream of dominating the world will be crushed in my hands." After saying that, Noah turned around. "Remember, you only have an hour." Chiwu Zhongshuan, who had always been unscrupulous, could not help but feel fear when he heard Noah's strong declaration and the cold aura around him. He screamed, "Go! Take me away!" The 4 guards immediately stepped forward and hurriedly helped Chiwu Zhongshuan up. They rushed into the elevator as if they were escaping. President Noah. At this time, the Holy Son of Heaven, who had been caught off guard and could not find a chance to interrupt, ran to Noah's side in a panic for the first time. "You! What are you doing? Enough!" Noah raised his hand and blocked the Holy Son of Heaven. His eyes looked through the glass window in front of him at the night view outside. "Just leave everything to me, if you still trust me." The Holy Son of Heaven opened his mouth, but in the end, he did not say anything and nodded with a worried face. The night was still going on, and it was destined to be quite long. Especially tonight. Chapter 135. Whoosh! On the dark road, a black limousine was driving at a speed of 150 kilometers per hour against the strong wind pressure as if its life depended on it. Bastard! Inside the limousine, Chiwu Zhongshuan gripped the door handle tightly and kept exerting force on it. The veins on his arms had already popped out, but he didn't care at all. He was still shouting with resentment on his face. A mere policeman dares, bastard." In the car, except for the driver, the other 3 guards held their guns tightly while fearfully enduring Chiwu Zhongshuan's angry and unwilling roar. Their hearts were beating violently. However, there was still a guard who chose to speak his mind. "President, why should we be afraid of that policeman? We should have just shot him, shouldn't we?" For these guards, who had only seen Noah once today, it was too embarrassing that Chi Zhongshuan, the ruler of the Osaka area, was so afraid of a policeman. Although these guards had seen Noah once in the hotel, they had not been able to stop Noah from approaching Chi Zhongshuan. At most, they felt that Noah did have some ability, but it was not enough to threaten the ruler of a region. Therefore, these guards really couldn't understand why Chi Zhongshuan ran away in such a panic. Such words naturally ignited the anger of Chi Zhongshuan, who was already very angry. Immediately, Chi Zhongshuan roared wildly. "What do you know?" The guards were shocked, but Chi Zhongshuan ignored them. He lowered his head, clenched his hands, and his face was pale. If possible, why wouldn't Chi Zhongshuan want to shoot Noah directly? Although Chi Zhongshuan coveted the power of the cursed child and the bullets that could kill the Scorpio in the fairy tale created by Noah, for Chi Zhongshuan, who was as ambitious as he was arrogant, Noah had offended him, and it was enough for him to die. But that was only if Chi Zhongshuan could kill Noah. Just like what Noah said, in today's world, a powerful police partner was enough to affect the military balance of the entire world. Chi Zhongshuan didn't know how powerful Noah was. However, Noah, who possessed the bullet, even if he wasn't very strong, his influence was still extraordinarily large. At the very least, Chi Zhongshuan felt that with his own strength, even if he gathered all the capable people under him, they would not be able to block a bullet that was powerful enough to kill a stage V protozoan. In addition, Noah had one-sided suppressed Chi Zhongshuan several times, and Chi Zhongshuan had sensed a fatal danger from Noah. Chi Zhongshuan could not guarantee that he could do anything to Noah. If he chose to fight against Noah, he didn't have a 100% chance of winning. It was even possible that he would fail miserably. Furthermore, the other party had all kinds of advantages and didn't need to worry about Chi Zhongshuan's identity. They could kill him at any time. So, other than running away, what else could Chi Zhongshuan do? In the past, although Chi Zhongshuan knew that a powerful police could affect the military balance of the entire world, knowing was one thing. Whether or not he could experience it was another. Now, this feeling of being powerless in the face of a powerful opponent made Chi Zhongshuan realize that in today's world, powerful strength was everything. As for identity, it was the same as what Noah had said. Chi Zhongshuan, who was adhering to these things, would either go back to the Osaka area and hide there for the rest of his life, or come out and dream of dominating the world. In the end, he would still have to walk towards failure with his identity. Hee. Chi Zhongshuan's face pulled up into an extremely ugly smile. "Noah Dole, you are indeed not an ordinary person. No wonder even the celestial chrysanthemum prime minister couldn't do anything to you. Consider it my loss this time, but you have also taught me the importance of true power. Therefore, I must make all the powerful people my claws and teeth." Chi Zhongshuan already had this idea. However, after this incident, Chi Zhongshuan was even more determined to have this idea. If Chi Zhongshuan could return to the Osaka area alive, he would definitely implement this idea firmly, and then recruit many capable people to work for him. At that time, Chi Zhongshuan, who focused on recruiting powerful people, might be able to further realize his ambition with the help of many powerful people under his command. Of course, that was if Chi Zhongshuan could return alive. The driver, who was stepping on the accelerator, inadvertently caught a glimpse of the top of a building in front of him. Then, his eyes widened and he shouted in disbelief. "What is that?" The sudden shout made the already tense atmosphere in the car explode. It also made Chi Zhongshuan stick his head out and shout. "What's wrong?" The driver could no longer look at the road and pointed at the top of a building in front of him. There. Hearing this, everyone in the car, including Chi Zhongshuan, turned their eyes to the top of the building. The limousine, which was speeding at 150 kilometers per hour, was getting closer and closer to the building. Not long after, in the limousine, Qi Wu Zhongshuan's eyes widened. He saw that at the top of the building, which was getting closer and closer, a figure stood on the edge. With the dark night sky as the background, the figure stood against the wind. The coat on his body fluttered in the wind. He held a gun in his hand. Even though there was a short distance between them, his cold eyes seemed to be able to be seen clearly. He looked at Qi Wu Zhongshuan's eyes. Impossible. Impossible. The guards in the car were horrified, and Qi Wu Zhongshuan hurriedly looked at the time displayed on his watch. It had indeed been an hour since they left the hotel. However, only about 10 minutes had passed from Noah's 1-hour limit. The limousine was moving at 150 kilometers per hour. That was to say, after an hour, Qi Wu Zhongshuan was at least 150 kilometers away from the hotel. In just 10 minutes, a person 150 kilometers away appeared in front of them. How is this possible? Qi Wu Zhongshuan's roar rang out in the car. Shoot! Shoot! Standing on the high ground against the wind, Noah looked down at the approaching car in the distance with a cold expression on his face. Mr. Ruler of Osaka, our game has begun. As soon as he finished speaking, the windows of the speeding car were suddenly opened. Several guns poked out and aimed at Noah's direction. Without any pause, the muzzles immediately flashed with muzzle flashes. Bang, 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 bang. Loud and chaotic gunshots reverberated in the night sky. Bullets with lethal power also cut through the air and fell on Noah's body like raindrops amidst the sharp sonic booms. Dang, 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 dang. Unfortunately, when the rain of bullets shrouded Noah like a storm fell on Noah's body, a black curtain composed of shadows suddenly appeared in front of Noah. While stirring up fierce sparks and loud collisions, all the bullets were blocked and bounced off one by one. Qi Wu Zhongshuan, who saw this scene with his own eyes, almost stared out. After he reacted, he hurriedly shouted to the driver. Quick! Overtake them! The driver hurriedly stepped on the accelerator and accelerated the car. It overtook the building where Noah was and turned into another road in the blink of an eye. Noah immediately stopped dancing crazily, blocking the incoming bullets with his gun. He stared at the vehicle that was gradually getting smaller in his field of vision. He crouched down and in the next second, he dashed out of the vehicle. Of course, even Noah could not really fly. However, Noah used the buildings on both sides of the road as stepping stones. Like a meteor jumping between the buildings, he turned into a stream of light and chased in the direction of the car. Chapter 136. On both sides of the vast and long road, the black shadow turned into a stream of light. Like a meteor jumping, it used the roofs of the buildings as stepping stones and leaped violently, chasing in the direction of a limousine that was speeding towards the front of the road. Monster! Monster! Qi Wu Zhongshuan, who saw this scene from the rearview mirror in the car, couldn't help but be frightened and murmured inaudibly. It wasn't that Qi Wu Zhongshuan had never heard of people who could jump between buildings. For example, it was easy for the cursed child, who had strong physical abilities with protozoan virus in his body, to do this step. However, for a human being, it was almost impossible to accomplish with his own strength. Could it be that guy is a mechanized soldier born under the new human creation plan? Qi Wu Zhongshuan could only think of this possibility. In addition to the cursed child, only a mechanized soldier with a machine transplanted in his body and transformed into the new human creation plan could do this. Damn the Holy Son of Heaven, he actually hid such a trump card in the Yodo area. Qi Wu Zhongshuan spat out resentful words, then roared at the guards in the car. What are you doing? Shoot for me. The guards, who fell into a state of absent-mindedness because of the scene that exceeded common sense, only then did they wake up. They quickly raised the guns in their hands through the car window and madly fired at the meteor-like figure that was jumping between buildings and approaching at a very fast speed. Bang 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 bang. Like raindrops, the bullet screen once again poured out, shrouding the figure that was leaping between the buildings behind. Clang 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 clang. Unfortunately, the barrage of bullets either missed its target and landed in the building where Noah was just a second ago, or was directly blocked by the gun in Noah's hand as he leaped forward. All of the bullets were neutralized. Whoosh! Braving the violent wind, Noah leaped out with a sharp air-braking noise and chased after the speeding limousine. He stared at the black limousine on the main road. His eyes kept sizing up the limousine and finally landed on the tires of the limousine. Gotcha! Only Noah could hear the mechanical gunshots. Noah raised the gun in his hand, aimed at the speeding limousine, and suddenly pulled the trigger. Bang! A gunshot that was louder than any gunshot from the limousine echoed in the night sky. Whoosh! The powerful anti-tank bullet turned into a sharp sound of friction with the atmosphere and fell heavily on the wheels of the limousine. Bang! Suddenly, the fragile tires of the limousine exploded as if they were blown up by a small bomb. Gee! After losing a tire, the limousine immediately spun like a spinning top. Amidst the continuous screams inside, it slid forward. Immediately, a guardrail appeared in front of the gliding limousine. Bang! In the fierce collision that made people close their eyes, the limousine crashed into the guardrail, bounced off, and smashed into the ground not far away. It rubbed against the ground for nearly 100 meters before stopping. Dong! With a loud bang, the gorgeous limousine exploded magnificently and was completely covered by a thick and raging fire. If there were still people in the limousine, they would definitely die in such a big disaster. Fortunately, at the critical moment, the 4 guards jumped out of the limousine with Chiwu Zhongshuan. After rolling on the ground for a few times, they stabilized their bodies and groaned bitterly. Goo! Chiwu Zhongshuan only felt dizzy. There was no place in his body that did not hurt. Even the air in his lungs was squeezed out. Lying on the ground, he could no longer move. Grand President. Around him, the 4 well-trained guards were fine. They got up from the ground one by one. Just as they were about to gather around Chiwu Zhongshuan, an indifferent voice sounded behind them. Is this the end? The 4 guards were all frozen on the spot. Naturally, Chiwu Zhongshuan also heard the voice. He raised his head with difficulty and looked forward. In front of the raging fire caused by the explosion of the limousine, to Chiwu Zhongshuan at this time, there was no doubt that the figure of the Grim Reaper was there. His back was straight, and he held a spear as he walked over step by step. At this moment, Chiwu Zhongshuan deeply understood what the deepest fear was. Stop, stop him! Chiwu Zhongshuan shouted without caring about his image. Quick! Stop him! Just as Chiwu Zhongshuan's hysterical voice fell, the 4 guards hurriedly raised their guns and pointed them at Noah. Bang 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 bang! However, before the 4 guards had time to pull the trigger, 4 gunshots rang out. Immediately after, 4 powerful bullets landed heavily on the guns in the hands of the 4 guards. Clang 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 clang. As the guards exclaimed in unison, the guns in their hands were knocked out of their hands. Get out of the way. The gun in Noah's hand was smoking as he said coldly to the 4 guards. This is none of your business. Ha! Unfortunately, not only did the 4 guards ignore Noah's warning, but they also seemed to have gone mad. They roared, pulled out their daggers and batons, and rushed toward Noah. From the corner of his eyes, Noah glanced at the guards who were charging at him from all directions. He slowly gripped the gun that was emitting smoke from the muzzle and closed his eyes slightly. A moment later, his eyes suddenly opened and the gun in his hand turned into a black shadow, bringing with it an oppressive force that lifted the atmosphere. Like a small black wind wheel, with Noah as the center, it ruthlessly swung towards the surroundings. Clang, 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 clang. Wherever the black wind will passed, sparks flew. The daggers and batons in the hands of the guards were directly shaken out of their hands by the powerful force contained in the wind wheel, and the web between their thumb and forefinger was also shaken to the point of cracking. Immediately, Noah's feet that were spinning suddenly stopped, and the black wind wheel dissipated. Looking up, Noah looked at the guards who were less than half a meter away from him, and his eyes turned cold. His body turned into an afterimage, and rushed in front of the 4 guards. Bang, 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 bang. Following 4 muffled sounds, the 4 guards cried out in succession. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and flew backwards. They heavily smashed into the ground around them. After struggling for a while, they fell weakly to the ground. Chiwu Zhongshuan sucked in a breath of cold air. These 4 guards were very capable guards that Chiwu Zhongshuan had spent a lot of effort to recruit. If these 4 guards were active as police officers, as long as there was a passable initiator, they would definitely be able to get into the top 300 IP rankings. These 4 guards would not necessarily lose to the cursed child, who was not very strong. Now, in the blink of an eye, they were defeated in the hands of the young man in front of him. How could Chiwu Zhongshuan not be shocked? You. Looking at Noah standing in the middle of the 4 guards who had fallen to the ground, Chiwu Zhongshuan's body could not help but move back. Noah turned his head and looked at Chiwu Zhongshuan, who was moving back on the ground. His eyes were like an ancient well, as if he had done something insignificant. He lifted his feet, walked forward, and came in front of Chiwu Zhongshuan. Noah raised his gun and pointed it at the head of Chiwu Zhongshuan, who was sitting on the ground, and spoke without mercy. You can't escape from my hands. Chiwu Zhongshuan's body froze there, and he no longer moved back. Looking at the black muzzle pointing at his head, the fear in his heart was even stronger. After all, as long as the owner of the gun gently pulled the trigger, the fatal bullet that was comparable to an anti-tank sniper rifle would break Chiwu Zhongshuan's head and make Chiwu Zhongshuan's head explode like a watermelon. At that time, the dignified ruler of the Osaka region would not be able to leave behind a glorious history, only a notorious reputation for oppressing the people, and disappear from the stage of history without any achievements. Chapter 137. Crackle. Crackle. The raging fire continued to burn on the charcoal-like scrap iron of the limousine, releasing a scorching red light that illuminated the dark night sky. In front of the fire, Noah, who was holding a gun, pointed it at himself, and Chiwu Zhongshuan, who was sitting on the ground, looked at each other. For a long time, they did not speak. Looking at Noah's emotionless eyes, Chiwu Zhongshuan had no doubt that Noah would pull the trigger at any time. Calm down. I must calm down. Chiwu Zhongshuan could only remind himself in his heart. He forced himself to calm down, looked at Noah, and clenched his teeth. What will it take for you to let me go? Beg for mercy. Noah seemed to be indifferent as he sneered. That doesn't seem like something you would do, President Chiwu. At the very least, I don't have that kind of boring self-esteem where I have to protect my pride even if I die. Chiwu Zhongshuan stared at Noah, as if he would pull the trigger if he looked away. I still have ambitions that I want to achieve no matter what. I don't want to die like this. So, tell me, what will it take for you to let me go? You should be glad that I don't have a heart full of righteousness like a hero. Otherwise, for the sake of the people in Osaka who have been oppressed by you, I would have killed you here, Noah said calmly, but his eyes were cold. Before that, I want to ask you a question. Chiwu Zhongshuan secretly sighed in relief and nodded. Go ahead. You were the one behind the assassination of Sage Tianzi, right? Noah looked at Chiwu Zhongshuan coldly. The person you asked was Ayn Rand, right? I did issue such a request. Chiwu Zhongshuan hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he chose not to hide it and told the truth. However, I only issued a request to a foreign partner. I don't know who they gave the order to or what kind of people they sent to carry it out. Oh. Noah smiled sarcastically. You have a relationship with a foreign partner. It seems that you are not just a daydream. Noah did not doubt the authenticity of Chiwu Zhongshuan's words. After all, such an assassination request would usually go through several people before it was finally passed on to the executor. Only in this way could the identity of the mastermind behind the scenes be perfectly concealed. Chiwu Zhongshuan had only sent out a request to a foreign country. Then, his collaborator had accepted the request and sent it to Ayn Rand. Only then did Ayn Rand send Tina to the Tokyo area to carry out the mission. With so many complicated steps, if they only caught the assassin, it would be even more difficult to find the mastermind behind all this. Chiwu Zhongshuan's luck was really bad. If it was someone else, he wouldn't be able to do anything even if he suspected that Chiwu Zhongshuan was the mastermind behind the assassination of the Elysian prince. Because he had no evidence at all. Therefore, even the Elysian child himself could not find a way to deal with Chiwu Zhongshuan. However, Chiwu Zhongshuan just had to meet Noah, who was rude and unreasonable, who did not play by the rules, and who possessed unparalleled power. This caused Chiwu Zhongshuan's meticulous deployment to be disrupted, and he was the one who was defeated. I don't care who you sent the request to, and I don't care about your unrealistic ambitions. Noah looked at Chiwu Zhongshuan, and his body began to release an aura that caused the surrounding temperature to drop. However, because of the matter of the assassin who helped you carry out the mission, I am very unhappy now, and I am even more unhappy with the guy who sent her here directly. Hearing these words, Chiwu Zhongshuan was startled at first, and then he thought of something. He looked at Noah in astonishment, and his voice was full of uncertainty. You mean, you want me to help you deal with Ayn Rand? I don't want you to help me. Noah looked at Chiwu Zhongshuan condescendingly. But, if you want to live, you can only exchange his life for yours. Chiwu Zhongshuan trembled all over and suddenly came to a realization. An incredible thought rose in his mind. Could it be that this person did not care about his life or death at all, and was not in the mood to deal with him? The reason why he forced him to this point and did not kill him directly was to let him deal with Ayn Rand. From the beginning, he did not enter his sight and was regarded as an enemy by him. To him, this pursuit was just a means to achieve his goal. Thinking of this, Chiwu Zhongshuan had an absolutely uncontrollable fear of Noah. Not only did he have wisdom comparable to the highest level of politicians, but he also had incomparable power, and his methods were so brilliant. What a terrifying person. Such a person was definitely not an enemy. At this moment, Chiwu Zhongshuan's fear and scruples for Noah rose to the peak. He gritted his teeth and nodded heavily. I can promise you, but you have to give me some time. Ayn Rand was the highest person in charge of the next in the United States. Her brain could even be ranked in the top 3 in the world. Otherwise, she would not have the ability to transform mechanized soldiers. Such a person, although her status was not high, could play a great role in a country. Even if Chiwu Zhongshuan wanted to deal with such a person, he could not do it openly. He could only do it behind the scenes, just like when he assassinated the Son of Heaven. Noah, who understood this, did not say anything. His heart, which had been suppressed because of Tina's appearance, slowly calmed down a lot. In this way, he could more or less get some interest for those cursed children who died on the operating table and were reduced to experimental subjects. In the future, no other cursed children would be killed by Ayn Rand. I hope President Chiwu can get rid of this eyesore as soon as possible. Noah put away the gun in his hand and turned around. I believe that today's experience will also make President Chiwu believe that if I want to find you, even if you hide in the Osaka area, I can still go to you. After leaving this sentence, Noah took a few steps forward and bent down. His figure turned into a stream of light and soared into the sky like a meteor, streaking across the sky and landing in another direction. Chiwu Zhongshuan still sat on the ground, looking around at the guards lying on the ground and the still burning limousine, and then looking in the direction where Noah disappeared. He did not speak for a long time. Tokyo District 1, Saint Residence. In the corridor, Noah walked in the direction of the Son of Heaven's room with heavy steps. Behind Noah, a group of guards led by Jiren Baowei followed closely. As they followed, they could hear Jiren Baowei's angry shouts. Noah Doria! Stop right there! Unfortunately, Noah didn't care about the annoying cawing of the bodyguard, who sounded like an injured crow, as he continued to walk forward. Didn't I tell you that the Son of Heaven has already rested? Jiren Baowei's voice was getting more and more crazy. Noah Doria! Do you like to stay with the Son of Heaven so much? Noah still didn't pay attention to the bodyguard. He let the bodyguard yell behind him as he passed through a corridor. As long as he passed through another corridor, he would reach the Son of Heaven's room. Seeing that Noah was ignoring him, and recalling the last sniper incident, the Son of Heaven that he coveted was snuggled in his arms and repeatedly invited him into her room. The anger in Jiren Baowei's heart was beyond the scope of rational control. You're just a policeman. Jiren Baowei growled and pulled out his gun, suddenly pointing at Noah's back and yelling with a face full of resentment. Don't be too arrogant. Bang! The next moment, a muffled sound was heard. However, it was not the sound of Jiren Baowei's gun, but the sound of a fist suddenly smashing into his face and sending him flying. Bang! Then, a foot landed heavily on Jiren Baowei's chest as he was about to fly backward, kicking him to the ground. Jiren Baowei, who was in so much pain, only heard this sound. You came to me when I was in a bad mood. You asked for it. After that, a series of punches and kicks landed on Jiren Baowei's body without mercy. Ah! Jiren Baowei's screams echoed throughout the Saint residence. Chapter 138. As soon as the door was pushed open, a melodious tune drifted out of the room and into Noah's ears. Noah was slightly startled, then silently walked into the room and gently closed the door. He raised his eyes and looked at the corner of the room. As always, Elysium, dressed in a white wedding gown, sat in front of a piano like a holy maiden. Her eyes were closed, and a quiet smile hung on her beautiful face. Her 10 fingers, which were wearing lace gloves, slid lightly on the piano keys, playing a beautiful piano piece. Seeing this, Noah's face, which had been tense for the whole night, finally softened. He did not make a sound, directly leaning against the door, arms crossed, eyes closed, and quietly listened to the beautiful piano music in the room. His heart slowly calmed down. Elysium's performance, strictly speaking, was not considered good. At the very least, it was incomparable to those musicians who had painstakingly studied the piano field for a long time. However, from the point of view of the masses, Elysium's performance could be said to be beautiful, and in the eyes of professional musicians, there was no fault to be found. Perhaps it was because the performer herself was a peace-loving, extremely kind and holy girl. After the piano piece was played, the beautiful movement became impeccable under the holy and pure temperament of the beautiful girl playing it. It also became very easy to resonate with others. Noah was the same. From Elysium's performance, Noah could clearly feel Elysium's love for peace and the great desire to create an ideal world, which made his heart calm down. It was incredible. This performance lasted for who knows how long. Until a certain moment, the beautiful sound of the zither seemed to gradually dissipate into the echoes, disappearing into the air bit by bit, causing Noah, who was leaning against the door with his eyes closed to listen, to open his eyes. Immediately, in the room, the man and woman who were alone together cast their eyes on each other at the same time. The 2 pairs of eyes also tightly locked, and for a moment, they did not move away. As a result, in the vast luxurious boudoir, the warm and quiet atmosphere suddenly turned aesthetic, causing the temperature in the air to rise slightly, adding a lot of warmth. In this atmosphere where only the 2 of them were left in each other's eyes, Noah's face could not help but show a trace of awkwardness, and Elysium's face also showed a faint blush. After a while, they both returned to normal, breaking the slightly pink atmosphere. Standing up from the piano chair, Elysium walked in front of Noah, showing a gentle smile. This piece was composed by the same musician as the one you played here for the first time. I can hear it. Noah also chuckled. Compared to the first time you played in front of me, your piano skills have improved a lot. You're even better than me now. That's because you taught me well. Elysium's smile. Also, to be able to smoothly play a complete piece, I am already satisfied. Noah nodded empathetically. Like Elysium, he was satisfied to be able to smoothly play a complete piece after learning the piano, and did not specifically study it. Whether it was Noah or Elysium, both of them considered playing the piano as a hobby to pass time, but not a hobby. After all, both of them had things that they really wanted to do. After a little chat, Elysium's smile disappeared, and she looked straight at Noah. I saw the confrontation between you and President Chi Wu on the big screen in the headquarters. Really? Noah sighed, lowered the hands in front of him, and gently bowed to Elysium. Sorry, this time I acted on my own accord. I am very grateful that you allowed me to do as I pleased. Didn't you ask me to trust you? Elysium shook his head, but there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. Moreover, compared to me, you're more suitable to confront that ambitious president. If it weren't for you, I would have died in the previous ambush. During the meeting with President Chi Wu, we'll definitely have friction due to our different ideals. Who knows, we might even become enemies. So you are worried about this? Noah frowned slightly. I'll get straight to the point. You've seen what kind of person Chi Wu Zhongshuan is. He wants to eliminate you and even the rulers of the other regions to unify this country. You, on the other hand, want to show peace in this chaotic world. No matter what, you two will become enemies. I know, so I am very grateful to you. Elysium said in a sincere tone. After your suppression, that ambitious schemer should temporarily restrain himself, and because of your existence in the Tokyo area, he won't dare to act rashly in the Tokyo area, which has bought me a lot of time. You also said that it is temporary. Noah glanced at Elysium. In short, this time I acted on my own accord. Even if I didn't cause you trouble, it can't change the fact. I hope you can understand. President Noah, you have gone too far. Elysium seemed to be a little unaccustomed to Noah's apology. As you said, although you acted on your own accord, it is also a fact that you have helped me a lot. Here, I need to express my gratitude. After that, Elysium bowed slightly to Noah. For the ruler of a region, this was already the highest form of treatment and etiquette given to others. In this regard, Noah did not choose to be polite or refuse. After accepting Elysium's bow, he smiled as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. In that case, the task of the guard has come to an end. Yes. It was indeed over. The mastermind behind the assassination of Elysium, Chi Wu Zhongshuan, was already on his way back to Osaka. The sniper who wanted to assassinate Elysium had also been defeated by Noah. In addition, the guard's time limit had already passed during the meeting with Chi Wu Zhongshuan. Therefore, Noah's guard mission was considered complete. Yes, it's over. Elysium's eyes moved slightly as her beautiful eyes locked onto Noah's. The request from last time, is it still not allowed? Looking at Elysium's beautiful eyes, Noah fell silent. Elysium's request must be for Noah to come to her side and help her rule the entire Tokyo region. Using the word request, it was obvious how much Elysium valued Noah. Unfortunately, Noah still laughed at Elysium's request. You should know that no matter how many times you ask, I will not agree. That's why I'm really confused. Elysium smiled bitterly. Why can't you agree to my request? The reason. Noah muttered to Elysium. You really don't know the reason. Elysium lowered her head. Noah had said more than once that he could not find a reason to protect the Tokyo region, so he could not agree to Elysium's request. However, apart from this, there was another reason. The job of assisting Elysium seems to be Tentong Chrysanthemum's job, right? Noah said directly. Is it really okay for me to stay by your side with Tentong Chrysanthemum's prime minister? Elysium was silent for a long time before speaking in a low voice. I just want to try my best to recruit capable people. After all, I still have a lot of shortcomings, and I can only rely on capable people to make up for them. You're wrong. Noah suddenly interrupted Elysium. You have to find ways to make up for your shortcomings, but you can't blindly rely on others to make up for it. Elysium was stunned. Take Tentong Chrysanthemum's prime minister for example. He can indeed make up for many of your shortcomings, and indirectly improve the governance of the Tokyo region. However, this also led to the last time. Undoubtedly, you knew that the other party's actions had caused harm, but you could only choose to tolerate it. Noah looked directly at Elysium and said word by word. If you really want to represent peace and become a qualified ruler that represents peace, then it's time to choose independence, Your Highness. These words pierced deeply into Elysium's heart, leaving an indelible mark in her heart. Chapter 139. When the bright sunlight shone through the window and illuminated the entire room, Hina slowly opened her slightly heavy eyes. The ceiling that came into view was unfamiliar. Hina was stunned for a long time, and a confused look appeared on her face. Sitting up, Hina found that she was lying on a bed, surrounded by a room that she had never seen before. Tina surveyed her surroundings with a puzzled expression. This place is... She furrowed her brows tightly as she tried to recall the scene before she lost consciousness. Hina remembered that she was sent to the Yodo area by her master to assassinate the Holy Sun, but she was defeated by a very powerful person in the first sniper attack. Later, after contacting the higher-ups, Hina learned that the person who was more than 1 kilometer away from her, but showed a stronger sniper ability and strength than her, was the president of Fairy Tail, Noah Dole. Whether it was Fairy Tail or Noah Dole, for Hina, they were all very familiar names. After all, Noah and Fairy Tail were the famous shelter of the cursed child. Because of this, the existence of Noah and Fairy Tail had already spread throughout the world, the only difference was the size of their reputation. For all the accursed children, who had heard of the existence of Noah and Fairy Tail, it was absolutely impossible for them not to pay attention to such an existence, and it was impossible for them not to have a good impression of such an existence. Hina was also one of the people who looked forward to Noah and Fairy Tail very much. After receiving the order to come to the Yodo area, Hina really wanted to meet Noah and see Fairy Tail. Unfortunately, before she had time to do this, Hina received the order that Noah was the person who defeated her in the sniper incident. At the same time, she also received the order to eliminate this obstacle. To be honest, Hina couldn't accept it. However, that was an order. For Tina, who was raised as a tool and could only rely on it to survive, if she disobeyed it, she would lose the meaning of living. Thus, Tina had no choice but to compromise. In the end, Tina was defeated once again. Moreover, Tina also discovered that the guild leader of Fairy Tail, whom she had always yearned for, was the first person in her life who was gentle to her, the first person who completely accepted her, and the first person who took care of her with incomparable care. After that, the series of battles with Noah also surfaced in Tina's mind. And at the end of this memory, it stopped at the scene where Noah pointed a gun at himself and pulled the trigger. Tina's memory stopped at this place before disappearing. This meant that after Noah pulled the trigger, Tina was already in this room when she opened her eyes. Is this heaven? Tina muttered to herself before a wave of drowsiness washed over her. Disregarding her identity as the next mechanized soldier, Tina was still an owl-type initiator. Under the influence of the owl-type factor in her body, not only could Tina enter her best state at night like an owl, but she also had enhanced vision and hearing. Therefore, Tina had always been active at night when she was most suitable for herself, resulting in her mental state not being very good during the day. Now, even if she had sufficient rest, she was still a little sleepy. Gotcha! At this moment, the sound of the door opening echoed, causing Tina to tremble and quickly look in the direction of the door. The person who walked into the room was a little girl about the same age as Tina. Moreover, it was a little girl that Tina was quite familiar with. At this moment, Tina was stunned and spoke in surprise. "Xiaoshi, you're awake." Xiaoshi, who walked into the room, raised his head and looked at Tina. He found that she was awake, but her face was expressionless as he nodded calmly. "Do you feel any discomfort?" No. Tina answered subconsciously, but she immediately reacted. Her gaze focused and the stern gaze that usually only appeared at night appeared in Tina's eyes. She then turned to look at Xiaoshi. "Where is this place?" "Here," Xiaoshi said calmly. "This is fairy tale." Fairy tale? Tina's little face was filled with confusion. "Why am I in fairy tale? Hearing this, Xiaoshi reminded her. "Do you remember what happened before you lost consciousness?" Tina couldn't help but recall the battle at night, and her expression became even more confused. I remember that I was defeated by my brother, and I even begged my brother to kill me, and then my brother pulled the trigger on me as I wished." "That's right." Xiaoshi suddenly spoke, interrupting Tina's memories. "You have already been killed by the president once." "Killed once?" Tina almost couldn't understand the meaning of this sentence, causing her to ask. "What do you mean?" "What I mean is, the previous Tina Sprinter is already dead." Xiaoshi answered matter-of-factly. "The current you is only the president's captive." Captive. Seeing that Tina was about to reveal a confused expression again, Xiaoshi directly grabbed Tina's hand and brought her down from the bed. "Follow me." After saying this, Xiaoshi pulled Tina, who was still in a daze, out of the room. In the moderately sized living room, Noah sat on the sofa. It was rare that he wasn't dealing with official business, but he held the remote control and madly pressed on the TV in front of him, looking for a program that he liked. Not long after, the sound of two people's footsteps came from the corridor, causing Noah to stop what he was doing and look in the direction of the corridor. There, Xiaoshi held Tina's hand and walked in front of Noah. Xiaoshi let go of Tina's hand and silently retreated to the side. "Brother." Tina glanced at Noah and found that Noah was also looking at her. She lowered her head with a depressed expression as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. At this point, if Tina still didn't know what was going on, then all the shady missions she carried out would have been for nothing, and she would have gotten to the 98th position in the IP rankings for nothing. In this situation, other than Noah sparing her life, was there any other possibility? She wanted to kill Noah. But Noah didn't kill her. Instead, he spared her and even brought her back to fairy tale. All these facts caused Tina's emotions to fluctuate for a long time, and she was still unable to say a word. "If you don't know what to say, then don't say anything." Noah seemed to see through Tina's heart as he reached out and patted Tina's head. "I just want to ask you, do you want to stay in fairy tale?" "Stay in fairy tale?" Unsurprisingly, Tina's face showed signs of wavering. As long as one heard of the existence of fairy tale, and was a cursed child, then there was no one who didn't want to stay in fairy tale. After all, fairy tale was the only shelter that could accommodate a cursed child. But, could she really stay in fairy tale? "My body is the product of the country's technology." Tina's face was full of disappointment. "Master won't let me stay here." However, Tina's disappointment was heavily dispersed by Noah's words. "That's something I need to consider." Noah rubbed Tina's head fiercely. You children only need to think about how to live happily. Feeling the warmth from the big hand on her head, Tina was immersed in it for a long time. Chapter 140. 98th place in the IP ranking. When Noah introduced Hina to Mugino and Rintaro, who happened to visit the house, Mugino and Rintaro looked at Hina in shock. Looking at Hina, who was standing beside Noah with a dazed expression and a silly smile on her face, Mugino and Rintaro looked at each other with a doubtful expression. Is this for real? Mugino walked half a circle around Hina. When he saw that Hina had lowered her head and was dozing off, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. To be honest, I know Noah isn't the kind of person who would lie, but I really can't believe that this child is a monster in the top 100 IP ranking. Mechanical soldiers. Rintaro paid attention to Hina's other identity. He seemed to be very interested in the mechanical soldiers. Cursed child, and mechanical soldiers. If this is true, then it's not strange for her to be in the top 100 IP ranking. Originally, the abilities of the cursed child were far beyond the scope of humans. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called the last hope of humanity. As for the mechanized soldiers, they were specially researched to be used in battle against the protozoa, whose strength far exceeded that of humans. Even some of the stronger cursed children could be compared to them. Now, both of these factors were concentrated in one person. Therefore, it was easy to imagine how strong this person was. Being able to be in the top 100 IP ranking was not an exaggeration at all. Only Noah knew that even if Mugino and Rintaro believed that Hina was in the top 100 IP ranking, they still underestimated Hina's ability. As everyone knew, the IP ranking was a ranking created by the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, ISO, after calculating the battle record and strength of each police team. In other words, the IP ranking of a police team was based on the battle record of the police team, as well as the combat ability of the initiator and the promoter. Therefore, the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, ISO, released a ranking for each police team with IP as a prefix. Initiator and promoter, when the first letters of the two were combined, it was IP. Because of this, once a police team disbanded, no matter who it was, as long as they formed a new team, the IP ranking would restart and start again. It was also because of this that Noah, who did not have an initiator, had not been promoted by the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, ISO. Hina was different. Hina had her own partner. That was Ayn Rand. However, as Hina's police partner, Ayn Rand only played the role of a commander. She didn't have any combat ability at all. Other than having a brain that was much stronger than the average person, she was completely an ordinary person. Therefore, Hina's IP ranking was completely based on her own combat ability. If Hina had an outstanding promoter, then the IP ranking would definitely be more than 98. This, Noah could guarantee. Unfortunately, the news of me joining Fairy Tale will soon spread to my master, my partner. At that time, we will definitely disband and the IP ranking will also restart. Because the assassination of the Holy Son of Heaven was not something that could be casually exposed, Hina could only explain it this way. Therefore, this IP ranking won't be maintained for long. You'll only lose your ranking, not your combat ability. Noah patted Hina's little head. As long as Hina finds a new partner, with your combat ability, you'll quickly rush into the top 100 again. Hearing this, before Hina had time to react, Muging's eyes lit up and suddenly smiled in front of Hina. Hey, Hina-chan, why don't you come to our Tendo Civilian Police Company? Noah and Rintaro were both stunned. Didn't I tell you that Hina has already joined Fairy Tale? Noah was speechless. Are you trying to poach me? Muging-san. Rintaro's face was full of awkwardness. No matter what, isn't this a little too obvious? What does it matter? Mugging glanced at Noah, snorted, and turned her head away. In any case, President Noah will definitely respect other people's choices, right? As soon as she said this, not to mention Noah, even the slow-witted Rentaro could sense the hostility in her words. What's wrong with Mugging-san? Rentaro couldn't help but mutter. Recently, she's been getting angry for no reason. What's going on? While Rentaro was still muttering, Noah realized that Mugging's tone was so angry because he was there. Needless to say, Mugging must still be thinking about what happened last time. He thought about the last time Noah went to the Tendo Civilian Police Company and the incident of the lucky pervert. With this in mind, Noah couldn't help but want to tease Mugging. He squatted down, patted Hina's little head, and asked with a smile. Hina, do you want to leave Fairy Tale and leave Big Brother's side? Leave Big Brother's side. Hina, who was in a daze, was startled at first, then she shook her head without hesitation. No. Tina-chan. Mugging's mouth twitched, and she looked at Hina with a fake smile. There's nothing good about that kind of guy. Our Tendo Civilian Police Company is a good choice. What's the specifics? Noah looked at Mugging with a half-smile and dealt a fatal blow. Could it be that the Tendo Civilian Police Company is treating you better than Fairy Tale? Mugging's smile, which was already very forced, immediately froze. Could it be that the Tendo Civilian Police Company is more famous than Fairy Tale? The muscles on Mugging's face kept twitching. Could it be that the Tendo Civilian Police Company is doing better than Fairy Tale? The word well was printed on Mugging's smooth forehead with a bam sound. Or, does the Tendo Civilian Police Company provide free food and accommodation for the employees, and can also pay for the employees' tuition fees? Noah shrugged. President of Tendo, is the treatment in your company at least at this level? Ha. Mugging had an extremely fake smile on his face. These things will happen sooner or later, is that so? Noah suddenly realized, and then patted Hina's head. Then Hina, do you want to go to the Tendo Civilian Police Company? No. Hina shook her head vigorously. I want to stay by Big Brother's side, no matter how good the treatment is. Mugging was instantly petrified. Sigh. Rentaro covered his face as he could not bear to watch. Ms. Mugging, can't you see that Hina just wants to follow Noah? Well, President of Tendo, it's not that you don't have charisma, it's just that you found the wrong person to poach. Noah was amused. So, please don't be discouraged. Your goal is to improve the treatment of the Tendo Civilian Police Company, and work hard. You. Mugging was so angry that his whole body trembled, and he ran out with tears in his eyes. Remember this. Ms. Mugging. Rentaro was shocked, and just as he was about to chase after him, Noah sighed beside him. Hina. Noah lowered his head and said to Hina, who had been dozing off. You go and rest first. Okay, Hina replied in a soft voice, and then wobbled toward the direction of the room. Noah then walked toward Mugging. You can't even take a joke like this, and you call yourself a lady. Rentaro stared blankly at Noah, who was walking out, and then he quickly chased after him. Chapter 141. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? On the busy street, Mugina seemed to have done it on purpose. She stomped on the ground with heavy steps and walked forward aggressively, making the people around her unconsciously take a few steps away from her. She kept nagging at the same time. So what if you're rich? I'll make a lot of money sooner or later too. From a bystander's perspective, Mugging's behavior was like she was trying to curry favor with a rich young master somewhere, and then she was deceived by that rich young master, causing her to go for wool and come home shorn. Therefore, the passers-by who heard Muging's nagging couldn't help but look at her with pity. Some even sized her up a few times, and then sighed and shook their heads. It was as if they were pitying a young girl who had been ruined by someone. Fortunately, Muging, who was extremely angry, didn't notice the expressions of the passers-by around her. Otherwise, with the anger in her chest now, even if she was a rich young lady, she wouldn't be able to hold it in and directly flip out, right? Rumble, Muging, who was walking forward with a face full of anger, suddenly heard a strange sound, causing Muging's delicate body to stiffen. Her beautiful face, which was originally full of anger, also froze there, and then turned into decadence. Clutching her stomach, Muging seemed to be in a daze and muttered this. I really want to eat steak. If those who knew Muging but only understood her at the level of a rich young lady heard this, they would definitely be scared half to death. Only those who truly understood Muging knew how difficult it was to realize Muging's desire. Under the continuous protest of her stomach, Muging couldn't help but take out her wallet from her pocket and open it. However, the situation in the wallet that entered her eyes made even Muging, who was its owner, involuntarily want to cover her eyes, not wanting to continue looking. Rumble, a sound louder than before once again came from Muging's stomach, reminding her that it was time to eat. Woo-woo. Muging cried out sorrowfully. I almost forgot, I went to that guy's house to freeload. If I had known, I would have run out after eating. This sentence just happened to be heard by a figure who came behind Muging and was about to stop her. At that moment, a rather speechless and helpless voice sounded from behind Muging. Should I say, as expected of an idea that only you have. Wah! Muging jumped in fright and hurriedly jumped a distance away. When he turned around and saw the face and expression of the person standing behind him rolling his eyes, he was instantly furious. What? Just now, you didn't anger me enough. Now, you've caught up with me and want to continue to anger me. Only you have bad taste. Noah sighed and shook his head as if he was telling a fact. Why don't you say that a person who wants to freeload at someone else's house and deliberately finds fault with the person who freeloads, only to be angered and leave and regret it in the end is even weirder, right? Ah. Muging choked. She wanted to refute, but she really couldn't find the words to refute. She could only glare at Noah, as if she could kill Noah with her gaze. She glared fiercely. Looking at Muging's behavior that resembled a little brat throwing a tantrum, Noah was both amused and annoyed. After looking around, he fixed his gaze on a stall selling bean paste buns and walked over. Under Muging's puzzled gaze, Noah bought 2 bean paste buns and then walked back. Rumble, when Noah approached Muging with 2 hot bean paste buns and was 3 meters away from her, Muging's stomach immediately protested, causing her to widen her eyes slightly. She stared straight at the bean paste buns in Noah's hand and stared blankly. Then, Muging moved. With a big stride, he closed the distance of 2 to 3 meters between him and Noah. Then, with a speed that even Noah almost couldn't see clearly, Muging snatched a bean paste bun from Noah's hand. Muging turned around and wolfed down the bun. Then, he wolfed it down. Noah, who was holding the other bean paste bun, had already stopped in her tracks. She opened her mouth slightly and froze there. After a while, Muging, who was empty-handed, turned her head with a red face and looked at Noah with tears in her eyes as if she had been greatly insulted. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't say anything." Noah looked at Muging with sympathy and pity, as if he was looking at a stray cat by the roadside. "Do you have a problem with that?" As if seeing through Noah's thoughts, Muging spoke incoherently with tears in his eyes. "Anyway, I'm just a stray dog that can only beg for food from others. I'm thinking of a cat, not a dog. That's too pitiful." Noah laughed bitterly. "Has your life become so difficult?" Muging bit her lips, lowered her head, took out the wallet that she had just opened, and handed it to Noah. Noah glanced at the wallet in Muging's hand, but the next second, he couldn't bear to look at it and looked away, covering his forehead. I heard that you went to the same aristocratic school as the princess in Tokyo, right? Why are you still in such dire straits? Going to the same aristocratic school as the Holy Son of Heaven is my last pride as a member of the Tentong family. Mugging retorted. I won't back down on this no matter what. But don't you hate it when people call you Tentong? Noah was confused. Maintaining the self-esteem of something you hate. What kind of self-esteem is that? How others see me is another matter. Mugging was a little impatient. I hate Tentong, or even hate them, but I don't hate and hate my parents who gave me this surname in life. Hearing this sentence, Noah changed his opinion of mugging. I thought there was only hatred left in your heart. Noah muttered this sentence in a voice that mugging couldn't hear, then hesitated and asked. I also heard that you have a kidney problem. Since you don't hate the life your parents gave you, why don't you accept a kidney transplant? The expression on Mugging's face gradually disappeared. As if her whole body had lost its strength, Mugging's delicate body slowly entered a state of relaxation. She raised her head, looked at the sky, and reached out her hand, making a gesture of grabbing something. Because I've already decided to use this life to kill all the heaven children. Therefore, I must use this illness to remind myself not to forget revenge. At this moment, all the human feelings on Mugging seemed to have disappeared. She was like a puppet, making people feel cold all over. You're just comforting yourself by doing this, but it has no effect on your so-called revenge. Noah frowned tightly. Because of this problem, you can't move for a long time at all, and you can't even fight for a long time. You also need to undergo hemodialysis all the time, wasting a lot of time. In this way, if a great opportunity for revenge suddenly appears in front of you, but you need to undergo hemodialysis, or you can't move because of your kidney problem and miss this opportunity, what will you do? Mugging, who was originally disapproving of Noah's words and wanted to change the topic, was stunned. For the first time in her life, she was shaken by her practice of remembering revenge. Noah, who clearly saw Mugging's hesitation, showed an imperceptible smile, but didn't continue to say anything. Instead, he deliberately changed the topic. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Let's hurry back, Rentaro should catch up with us. With that, Noah was about to walk back, but Mugging abruptly grabbed his sleeve and lowered her head. Just when Noah thought Mugging wanted to say something about revenge, Mugging's voice, which was softer than a mosquito's, entered his ears. Can you give me the other bean paste bun? The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. He glanced at the bean paste bun in his hand, then looked at the embarrassed Mugging, and was speechless. Poor and destitute, but not losing her temper. She was blinded by hatred. In the end, which one was the real Tentong Mugging? Chapter 142. President, it's time to wake up, big brother, please wake up. Noah heard this voice while he was still asleep. It was a voice that Noah was very familiar with. Thus, Noah slowly woke up from his sleep. However, in the process of waking up, Noah still heard such a conversation. Looks like it won't be that easy to wake up. How is that possible? Isn't Big Brother's senses very sharp? Even if he was asleep, he should have sensed our presence and woken up, right? Maybe it's because the president is very familiar with our presence, and we don't have any hostility or malice, so the president didn't wake up. Then what should we do? At this time, we can only use the knowledge we read in books. The knowledge we read in books. Yes, it's written in books that if you want to wake up the opposite sex, you have to give them a morning kiss. Kiss. In your words, it means kiss, do you understand? Kiss, kiss Big Brother, then, let me wake the president up. Wait. Wait. Please give this task to me. As this conversation entered Noah's ears, two extremely slender and hot bodies pressed against Noah's body. Noah could clearly feel the sweet breath of the two people talking, and the presence of the two people was getting closer and closer. Noah, who sensed that something was wrong, immediately shivered, and all of his consciousness was instantly awakened. He opened his eyes and sat up abruptly. Immediately after, the two little girls who were pressed against Noah, or more accurately, sitting on Noah's body, were immediately sent flying by Noah, who sat up. Their bodies bounced twice on the soft bed before stopping. Noah, who finally saw clearly who the newcomer was, had a bitter expression as he questioned. "Xiaoshi, Tina, why is it you two again?" Facing Noah's questioning, Xiaoshi and Tina looked like they were completely used to it. At the same time, they tilted their heads and gave irrelevant answers. "Good morning, President, Big Brother." Seeing the two very cute little girls tilting their heads at the same time, one with a cold and innocent face, the other with a smile that was more heartwarming than the breeze, and both of them were lying on his bed, leaning forward, looking like they were at his mercy, Noah's heart couldn't help but beat faster. "President." Almost at the same time that Noah's heart beat faster, the high IQ girl with an IQ of 210 pointed at Noah's face with curiosity. "You're blushing." "No. No." It was rare for Noah to panic, and he even stuttered for a while. After he reacted, he quickly clenched his fists, pretended to cough, and put on a straight face. "You two, how many times have I told you not to barge into my house? You have your own home, so why do you keep barging into mine?" Hearing this, Xiaoshi and Tina looked at each other, then turned their heads and said in unison, "Come and wake the president, Big Brother, up." Noah suddenly felt like all the strength in his body was gone. His shoulders drooped, and he looked sad. This is definitely a perfunctory answer. "Definitely, President, please have some tea. Big Brother, please use a towel." In the cold hall, as soon as Noah sat on the sofa, Xiaoshi and Tina brought tea and a towel. They came from both sides of Noah at the same time, and handed the things in their hands to Noah. At this time, whether it was Xiaoshi who didn't like to smile, or Tina who was usually in a daze, they both put on a docile and obedient look like newlyweds serving their husband. This made Noah a little amused, and he couldn't help but chuckle. And these two chuckles also caused the two little girls to be dissatisfied. "President, please have some tea. Big Brother, please use a towel." It was the same sentence, but Xiaoshi and Tina's behavior was completely different from before. If Xiaoshi and Tina were like docile and obedient newlyweds just now, then, they were like arguing with their husband, wanting to have a cold war, and at the same time wanting to get closer to him, trying to get their husband to apologize first, and being ready to forgive him at any time. Noah more or less couldn't help but laugh, but he could only suppress the laughter in his heart. He hung the towel in Tina's hand around his neck, wiped his face, and took the tea from Xiaoshi's hand, and took a sip. "Thanks." No matter what, Xiaoshi and Tina were still children, and their dissatisfaction from before was immediately forgotten. With a satisfied face, they sat down on either side of Noah. Xiaoshi had already turned on the TV, picked up the remote control, and looked for programs that interested her. Tina swung her two little legs and yawned cutely, but her face didn't have the usual sleep-deprived look, which made Noah feel strange. "I feel like Tina is a lot more energetic than usual. Is it just my imagination?" "No, Big Brother." Tina showed a gentle smile. She did look a lot more energetic than usual. "A few days ago, I used to take sleeping pills at night to make myself fall asleep, but now I'm more or less used to it, and can move around during the day." "Move around during the day?" Noah couldn't help but ask. "Is that okay?" Tina was an owl-type initiator, and she was very good at moving around at night. It wasn't that Tina couldn't move during the day, but it was very advantageous for her to move during the night. At night, a normal person's vision would be affected to some extent, and because of the ample activity during the day, during this kind of resting time, their body and mind would be tired, and they wouldn't be in their best condition. But Tina, whose vision and hearing had been strengthened, not only did she not have to worry about her vision, but because of her all-type trait, she was in her best condition at night. Under this kind of situation, if Tina fought with others, it would definitely be advantageous. But if Tina adjusted her time to move around during the day, then this advantage would be completely wiped out. That was why Noah asked such a question. It's okay. Tina shook her head, although her movement wasn't very big, her tone was very firm. I also want to live with Big Brother and everyone. Needless to say, Noah, Xiaoshi, and the others all moved around during the day and rested at night. If Tina wanted to live with Noah, Xiaoshi, and the others, she would have to adjust her schedule, otherwise, it would be very difficult for her to interact with them. Tina didn't want to waste the life that she worked so hard to get, which was much better than before. Just because of this, Tina wouldn't change her mind. Is that so? Noah could naturally understand Tina's thoughts, and of course, he wouldn't object. He patted Tina's little head, and when Tina revealed a comfortable expression, he smiled slightly. I also want to live with you guys. A satisfied smile appeared on Tina's face. President. At this time, Xiaoshi suddenly tugged at Noah's clothes. Just as Noah looked at Xiaoshi, Xiaoshi reached out his hand and pointed in the direction of the television, attracting Noah and Tina's attention. On the television, the news was being broadcast. Last night, at 11:43 Tokyo time, a return flight from Osaka to the United States was attacked by a protozoan with the ability to fly, and unfortunately crashed. Following this report, photos of the wreckage of the plane and the people involved in the crash were also listed and arranged on the television. When she saw the top photo of the crash victims, Tina's eyes suddenly widened, and she stood up from the sofa in disbelief. Then, the mechanical and emotionless report sounded again from the television. According to the latest news, the plane belonged to a famous American scientist who visited the Osaka area not long ago. It was a medical expert, Professor Ayn Rand. After the incident, Professor Ayn Rand was also confirmed as a victim of the plane crash, and she has passed away. An extremely oppressive atmosphere suddenly filled the entire hall. Xiaoshi, who knew what the name Ayn Rand represented, couldn't help but look at the shocked Tina. Noah narrowed his eyes, and a bright light flashed through his eyes, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Chapter 143. On TV, there were several reports about Ayn Rand's death due to a plane crash. That was to be expected. Aside from what kind of person Ayn Rand was, he was also a renowned scientist and medical expert who, along with 3 other people who had the ability to modify mechanized soldiers, were known as the most powerful minds. Such a person with extraordinary knowledge and technology could almost be said to be the treasure of a country. The loss of one was definitely a misfortune for the world. Not to mention, she died in an accident. Regarding this, the country that Ayn Rand belonged to also seemed to be extremely distressed and said that they would thoroughly investigate this matter. The ruler of the Osaka area that Ayn Rand visited before her death, Kiwamuni-kun, also expressed in tears in an interview that he hated himself for not keeping Professor Ayn Rand for one more night. That way, he wouldn't have been attacked by the primitive animals. Unfortunately, no one would know that this person who expressed regret in an interview was the culprit behind Ayn Rand's death. No, Kiwamuni-kun wasn't the culprit. After all, Kiwamuni-kun was also threatened by Noah that he planned to invite Ayn Rand to the Osaka area to visit. Then, when Ayn Rand was on her way back, he planned to lure the primitive animals with the ability to fly to attack her. All in all, no matter what the inside story of this incident was, no matter how many people lamented it, and no matter how many people wanted to investigate this incident, none of it could affect Noah, Xiaoshi, and Tina who were watching this report in front of the TV. Noah, Xiaoshi, and Tina had different reactions to this incident. Professor. Tina's small and pretty face was full of complex emotions. She couldn't express how she felt about the fact that the culprit who had put her on the operating table and forced her to live a dark life had died just like that. Tina wasn't someone who liked to hate others. Even though Tina knew that she had been on the brink of death countless times because of Ayn Rand, she had never truly hated Ayn Rand. Of course, not hating Ayn Rand was one thing, but it was completely impossible for Tina to like Ayn Rand. Therefore, when Ayn Rand died because of a plane crash, Tina's feelings were very complicated. Happy. Tina, who didn't hate Ayn Rand, obviously didn't feel happy. Sad. She had been used as a lab rat by Ayn Rand, and then used as a tool to her heart's content. If Tina was saddened by Ayn Rand's death, then she would be even more merciful than the Holy Sun. Thus, the only emotion that Tina was able to discern was that her entire body felt relaxed in that instant. Tina was a mechanical soldier modified by Ayn Rand. To put it bluntly, she was an experimental lab rat. To put it nicely, she was the crystallization of the country's technology. After all, no matter what, Tina's body was the result of meticulous modification by one of the world's most powerful scientists. For a country, this was the most advanced technology. Coupled with Tina's betrayal, there was no way Ayn Rand would allow Tina to continue staying in fairy tale, and allow her proud work to be controlled by someone else. Therefore, Ayn Rand would definitely send out troops to hunt Tina down. Even if the entire Tokyo area was thrown into chaos, she would do everything in her power to kill Tina. Now that Ayn Rand was dead, Tina was free from the fate of being hunted down. As such, how could Tina not feel relieved? Noah, who clearly saw Tina's complicated emotions at first, then she breathed a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but smile and continue to stroke Tina's little head. In this way, you can be considered to have completely gotten rid of the past. Tina clenched her hand and looked at Noah's familiar smile. The expression on her face finally seemed to melt. She revealed a soul-stirring smile and nodded heavily. Beside them, Xiaosher, who had been silently watching Noah and Tina, had an extremely faint smile on his face that disappeared in the blink of an eye. In such a warm atmosphere, Noah, Xiaosher, and Tina didn't notice the news that followed the news of Ayn Rand's death in a plane crash. It was the news that the Holy Sun in the Tokyo area disbanded his own holy residence guards for reasons such as incompetence and slacking. The guards led by Takahito were fired or demoted. Tokyo Area 1, Holy Residence, Lord Holy Sun. Lord Holy Sun. The Holy Sun, who was discussing official matters with the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime in the conference hall, suddenly heard anxious noises coming from outside the hall. Almost at the same time, the Holy Sun and the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime both frowned and turned to look in the direction of the noises. Over there, a group of guards led by Bao Wei Zhuoran were trying their best to separate the guards while hysterically rushing over. The noise became more and more ear-piercing, making the Holy Sun of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime Ministers frown deeper and deeper. Before the Holy Sun could say anything, the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime said coldly, "Let them in." Only then did the guards stop blocking Takahito and the others and let Takahito rush in front of the Holy Sun and the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime. "Lord Holy Sun. Why are you disbanding the guards? Why are you dismissing us?" Disbanding the guards. The Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime paused and looked at the Holy Sun. Clearly, the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime had never heard of this matter. The Holy Sun slowly relaxed his tightly furrowed brows and calmly looked at Takahito. "Since you've already received the notice to disband the guards, then the reason should be given to you as well, right? What kind of reason is that?" Takahito seemed to have lost his rationality and didn't show any respect for the Holy Sun as he threw the dismissal document in his hand on the ground. "Incompetent. How am I incompetent? Captain Takahito." The Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime glared at Takahito. "Please watch your tone." "But, Lord Celestial Prime, I really don't understand. Takahito couldn't hide the anxiety in his voice. Why were we dismissed for no reason? Captain Takahito, didn't the previous sniping incident show you your inadequacies? The Holy Sun was still calm. As guards, your experience is obviously insufficient. You can't guarantee my safety when I need it. So, I hope you can stop messing around. The previous sniping incident. Shuo Wei was stunned for a moment, and then he seemed to understand something. He opened his eyes wide, waved his hands, and shouted loudly. I understand now. I understand now. It must be Noa Doria. It must be Noa Doria. Noa Doria. The Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime narrowed his eyes and looked deeply at Takahito. What's going on? Lord Holy Sun, Noa Doria must have said something to you, that's why you're dismissing us, right? Takahito ignored the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime and approached the Holy Sun step by step like a madman. You can't believe what he says. He's the shelter of the cursed child. The Holy Son of Heaven frowned when he saw the bodyguard closing in on him. He raised his hand and a group of guards immediately rushed out and grabbed the bodyguard. What are you doing? Takahito struggled. Let me go. The Holy Son of Heaven didn't want to say anything more. He waved his hand, and the guards pushed Zhuo Ren and the others out of the room. The scene returned to its original calm. The Holy Sun then spoke to the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime. Mr. Chrysanthemum Prime, let's continue. The celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime, nodded. He glanced at the Holy Sun, who didn't intend to explain anything to him. He then glanced in the direction where the bodyguard left. His eyes gradually sharpened. The Holy Sun didn't discuss this matter with the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime in advance. And this was something that had never happened before. Chapter 144. The cool morning air spread with the breeze, making the dewdrops seem to be frozen. They hung on the leaves and didn't fall for a long time. In fairy tale, Noah and Rentaro stood side by side in an open-air training ground. They held their guns in their hands and aimed in front of them, concentrating. Clank. At a certain moment, the sound of a bouncing object could be heard from the left and right in front of Noah and Rentaro. Immediately after, two light frisbees shot out from the left and right at the same time and flew to the center of the training ground. Without the slightest hesitation, Noah and Rentaro pulled the triggers of their guns at the same time. Bang! Accompanied by the sound of gunfire, two bullets pierced through the air and shot out, landing on the two frisbees at the same time. Bang! The two frisbees that had just flown to the center of the training ground immediately exploded. They were directly penetrated by the bullets and turned into a pile of fragments, falling to the ground like porcelain plates. Clank, 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 clank. Unfortunately, Noah and Rentaro, who had successfully hit the moving targets, did not have the time to rejoice. In the next second, the sound of bouncing objects could be heard continuously. One by one, the frisbees that had turned into afterimages also shot out, drawing beautiful arcs in the air as they flew to the center of the training ground. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with frisbees flying toward them. The dazzling sunlight from the distant horizon shone on the frisbees, making them look exceptionally dazzling. Under such circumstances, trying to shoot through the dazzling light and hit the frisbees was as difficult as trying to thread a needle with one's eyes closed. However, even so, Noah and Rentaro did not hesitate at all. They stood still and pulled the triggers of their guns. Bang, 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 bang. Bang, 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 bang. The loud gunshots and the sound of the frisbees exploding reverberated throughout the entire training ground, creating a cacophony of noise. If one were to listen carefully, one would discover that the gunshots from Noah and Ryutaro almost overlapped with each other. In other words, Noah and Rintaro both fired at the same time. At the same time, both Noah and Rintaro did not miss the target even once. In other words, not only did the two of them shoot at the same time, but the time they took to hit the frisbee and the number of frisbees they pierced were also the same. Their chemistry was terrifying. The only difference was that Noah and Rintaro took different amounts of time to reload. Noah's modified revolver only had 6 bullets. Therefore, every time he fired 6 bullets, Noah would slap his waist and throw a new round of ammunition into the air. In less than a second, he would flick his hand and flick the shell in his gun's magazine. Using his amazing technique, he would accurately load the bullets that fell from the air into the magazine's magazine before continuing to shoot. On the other hand, Rintaro's XD series pistol had more than 10 bullets in it. However, with Noah's amazing reloading technique, Rintaro was unable to beat Noah to the draw. The timing of their shots was always the same. Every time Rintaro ran out of bullets, he would need to reload as well. Logically speaking, without Noah's amazing reloading technique, Rintaro should be falling behind Noah more and more. However, that was not the case. Unlike Noah, Rintaro, who used the XD series pistol, only needed to take out the magazine and reload it with a new one. As long as one was specially trained, the time required for this process could be shortened to less than a second. Therefore, Noah and Rintaro both maintained the same timing, number of hits, and accuracy. When there was only one frisbee left in the middle of the training ground. For some reason, Noah suddenly stopped what he was doing, causing the time he took to pull the trigger was slower than before. This is my chance. Rintaro's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise as he quickly pulled the trigger. Bang! In the midst of the gunshot, the bullet flew across the sky and accurately pierced through the center of the frisbee in the middle of the training ground. Ryutaro didn't notice that at the same time he was pleasantly surprised. Noah had a triumphant smile on his face as he pulled the trigger. Bang! Amidst the smoke, the bullet fired from the modified revolver didn't land on the frisbee. Instead, it caught up with Ryutaro's bullet and slammed into it. Clang! In the midst of the crisp sound, the two bullets collided with each other and changed their paths at the same time, rebounding in different directions. As a result, Rintaro's bullet that should have pierced through the frisbee was completely ineffective. Rintaro was completely dumbfounded. Bang! At this time, another gunshot was heard. The bullet pierced through the air and pierced through the frisbee in the middle of the training ground. Bang! The frisbee shattered, and the fragments fell to the ground, announcing the end of the shooting competition. Rintaro stared at the fragments of the frisbee on the ground speechlessly, then he silently looked at Noah, who was holding the gun with smoke coming out of the muzzle. He was speechless for a long time. To put it simply, he had a sullen expression on his face. Isn't that too despicable? Hearing Rintaro's sullen protest, Noah nonchalantly played with the gun and said, "This is also a shooting technique. I followed your instructions and only used shooting. How is that despicable?" "That's true." Rintaro was still unconvinced. He put his hands on his waist and covered his forehead with a helpless expression. "But can't you let an ordinary person like me win?" President Noah. Really? Noah had an innocent expression. "But I'm also an ordinary person." Rintaro's mouth twitched. Ordinary person. Killing the world-destroying protozoa named Scorpio, and easily defeating the 98th ranked IP, would the person who took it under his command be an ordinary person? Who would believe it if he said it out loud? Noah didn't realize that he had said something unbelievable. He gestured to the side with his mouth and signaled Rintaro to look over. Besides, in terms of shooting ability alone, that person over there is the one with the true godly skill. Rintaro couldn't help but look over at the same spot as Noah. Bang! 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 On another field, Tina, who was lying prone on the ground, raised her sniper rifle and pulled the trigger again and again, shooting through one small target after another that was the size of a palm. Moreover, every shot hit the red heart on the target that was the size of a fingernail. Seeing this, Rintaro couldn't help but look at the field where Hina was shooting. There, 3 spherical objects were flying aimlessly in the air. Like cameras, they scanned the field, pacing back and forth as if they were patrolling. Rintaro clicked his tongue. That's Sandfeld, right? Sandfeld. It was a thinking interface. To put it more simply, it was a long-distance detection device. There was an extremely sophisticated observation device inside. It could wirelessly transmit the target's coordinates, temperature, humidity, angle, wind speed, and other information back to the controller's brain. It was because of Sandfeld that Hina could become a super sniper who could hit 100% of her targets even from a distance of 1 kilometer. Ayn Rand had implanted the neuron chip that controlled Sandfeld in Hina's brain. She had also implanted a metal balancer in Hina's body. This solved the problem of the arm shaking caused by the heartbeat and breathing of the sniper, making Hina a godly sniper who could hit 100% of her targets. In addition, the owl factor in Tina's body strengthened her vision, hearing, and other aspects. This allowed Tina to become a super strong sniper who was born for sniping. In one fell swoop, she shot up to the monster level of the 98th place in the IP ranking, achieving great fame. No matter how many times I see it, it's amazing, Rintaro said with sincere admiration. Even though Hina's sniping ability had only been strengthened to the extreme, Rintaro believed that even if he had Yen Zhu's help, he would have no chance of winning. Of course, that was under normal circumstances. Chapter 145. In fact, Noah, Hina, and Rintaro were not the only ones training in this large training ground. Seeing that Hina was still immersed in sniping and was still trying to distance herself, Noah and Rintaro raised their eyes and looked at another training ground. It was not a shooting training ground, but a combat training ground. In the training ground, Mugging, who was wearing a black sailor suit, and Yen Zhu, who was wearing a one-piece dress, were facing each other. However, the way they faced each other was completely different. Mugging bent his body slightly, closed his eyes, and lowered his center of gravity. One of his hands was placed on the hilt of the tachi in his other hand. He maintained the posture of drawing the sword and looked like he was listening attentively. In contrast to Mugging, although Yen Zhu also bent her body and was in a defensive posture, her face was full of impatience and indifference. She looked like she was about to make a move. Outside the training ground, Xiaoshu, who had dolphin-like genes and was better at using his brain than fighting, did not participate in the training. He stood to the side and was obviously acting as a referee. Rintaro, who was completely focused on Mugging, praised him when he saw this scene. That's the nirvana heart of the tomato-style sword-drawing technique. It's an attack and defense combination of the tomato-style sword-drawing technique. Hearing Rentaro's words, Noah glanced at Mugging and nodded. Although he did not know the essence of the tomato-style martial arts, Noah had learned a lot of martial arts and techniques from this world. Naturally, he could see that Mugging's current state was the most suitable for both offense and defense. Moreover, Mugging's stance did not have any loopholes. No matter which direction Yen Zhu attacked from, once she stepped into the attack range, Mugging would definitely immediately draw his sword and mercilessly slash at Yen Zhu with lightning speed. Yen Zhu might not know the secret of Mugging's current posture, but her extraordinary combat instincts made her not act rashly and she was waiting for an opportunity. However, it was clear that in terms of patience, Yen Zhu was much weaker than Mugging. Looking at Yen Zhu's impatient expression, Noya and Ryutaru couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts at the same time. It's about time. It was just as Noah and Rintaro had expected. Ah! Yen Zhu suddenly released the power in her body. Her eyes turned crimson. Her body was like a cannonball. She rushed forward and charged forward. The first form of the heavenly child blade drawing technique. Almost at the same time, the crisp sound of wood and the sound of a katana being unsheathed rang out. Dripping water turns to ice. The sound of the tachi being unsheathed was very soft, only a slight whoosh sound could be heard. However, when the tachi was unsheathed and slashed in the air, the sound of something cutting through the air reverberated loudly. Clang! It was the sound of an indomitable slash cutting through the air, leaving the blade in Muging's hand and advancing forward. Almost everyone present could see that at the same time Mugung pulled out his sword, a dazzling sword light fiercely cut through the sky. With a sharp sound, it slashed towards the charging Yanzhu. In an instant, Yanzhu's face showed an embarrassed expression. Yanzhu had never seen a flying slash or anything like that. Not to mention Yanzhu, even Rentaro's mouth formed an O shape. Even Noah was a little surprised. He didn't expect Muging's swordsmanship to be so high that he could slash from a distance. It was simply shocking. Fortunately, no matter what, Yanzhu was someone who Noah personally taught her combat skills. After a moment of embarrassment, she immediately reacted and leaped up. Whoosh! Yanzhu immediately leaped high into the air and dodged the incoming slash. Then, she dove down like a torpedo and rushed towards Muging. This time, it was Muging's turn to show a surprised expression. While hurriedly retreating, he repeatedly slashed. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of the sword light cutting through the air rang out continuously. The saber light flashed, and soared into the sky. It seemed as if a sharp steel blade was sweeping towards Yanzhu, who was shooting down from midair. However, this time, Muging had obviously miscalculated. Muging only thought that Yanzhu, who was in midair, had no way to change her direction, so he unscrupulously slashed. Unfortunately, this judgment was wrong. Because even if Yanzhu couldn't dodge, she could choose to block. Hey yeah! In midair, Yanzhu let out a delicate cry. Her body spun, and the iron shoes on the soles of her feet kicked out along with her slender calves. She heavily kicked the blade light that was flying towards her. Bang! With a muffled sound, the sword light in midair was directly shattered by Yanzhu's kick, stirring up a gust of wind. In turn, it pushed Yanzhu, causing her to dive even more fiercely and fiercely. Muging finally understood his mistake and hurriedly retreated. However, this was another wrong judgment. Yanzhu was a rabbit-type initiator. Not only was her leg strength strengthened, but her speed was also unprecedentedly enhanced. Ta! Therefore, when Muging was still retreating, Yanzhu, who was on the ground, bounced out of her body like a spring and appeared in front of Muging, who was retreating. Hey! Immediately after, Yanzhu raised her leg and kicked up from below. With an uppercut, she heavily kicked the sword in Muging's hand. Clang! The sword in Muging's hand was immediately kicked away. Stop! Outside the arena, Xiaoshi accurately grasped the opportunity and made the judgment. This round is Yanzhu's victory. Yay! Yanzhu immediately cheered and pounced in Noah's direction. President! Did you see that? I'm super powerful, right? Noah could only catch the pouncing Yanzhu and said with an exasperated expression. Yes, 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 you're the best. Yanzhu's face was full of smiles, and she kept rubbing against Noah's chest. Seeing this scene, Tina was envious, and Xiaoshi also kept glancing over. So I really can't beat the initiator. On the other side, Muging sighed regretfully, picked up his sword, and waved it. I thought I could at least put up a fight. Well, Mugen-san is already very powerful. You were able to exchange a few blows with Yanzhu, who is also very powerful among the initiators. If you were to compare her to the average initiator, you wouldn't be that far behind, right? Ryutaro scratched his head. If it were me, I would have lost in an instant. Do you even need to ask? Mugging immediately put her hands on her hips and said with a righteous expression. I've learned the Heavenly Child sword drawing technique. Rikyo-kun, if I remember correctly, your Heavenly Child sword drawing technique is only at the beginner level, right? Ryutaro immediately turned his head away in embarrassment. For example, Mugung was a grandmaster of the Tenkido-style sword drawing technique, while Rintaro was a beginner in the Tenkido-style combat technique. He was not much better than a novice, so how could he compare with Mugung, who was a grandmaster? Seeing Ryutaro's subservient expression, Noah couldn't help but smile as he hugged Yenju. If this Ryutaro were to get married in the future, he would definitely be a henpecked husband, right? Ring, ring, ring. At this moment, Xiaoshi's phone rang. While everyone was looking over, Xiaoshi picked up the phone with a calm expression. After a while, he revealed a somewhat surprised expression. After saying a few words to the other end of the phone, he hung up the phone and walked over to Noah. Before the others and even Noah could react, Xiaoshi raised his head and directly said, President. We have a guest. A guest? Noah was stunned. What kind of guest surprised you? Mugging crossed her arms and lightly snorted. It can't be that snake girl emoji, right? However, Xiaoshi revealed a rare hesitant expression. After a while, he spoke in a low voice. It's the Prime Minister of the Heavenly Child Chrysanthemum. The air around them suddenly froze. The Prime Minister of the Heavenly Child Chrysanthemum. Ryutaro was completely shocked. The Prime Minister of the Heavenly Child Chrysanthemum. A ferocious light flashed through Muging's eyes. The Prime Minister of the Heavenly Child Chrysanthemum. Noah narrowed his eyes and sneered coldly. He put away his gun and patted Yenju and Hina's heads before walking forward. Everyone looked at each other and followed after him. Chapter 146. Kacha. When the door to the reception room was opened, the scene in the room was revealed to Noah and the others. Noah and the others immediately saw the figure. It was a figure that they often saw on television. Undoubtedly, the old man was 4 to 5 times older than Noah and the others. However, the old man in a kimono was sitting upright on a cushion in the reception room with his eyes closed. He looked like a swordsman in cultivation and exuded an awe-inspiring aura. Looking at the old man who hadn't changed at all despite not seeing him for a long time, Mugging and Rentaro's expressions were tense. They didn't look like they were meeting a family member at all. Instead, they looked like they were facing a great enemy. Compared to Mugino and Ryutaro, Noah, who had been fighting with the old man for more than a year, had a calm expression on his face as he casually said. Xiaoshi, take Hina and Yenju out. Xiaoshi nodded without hesitation after fully understanding the relationship between Noah and the Tenkyo chrysanthemum. Yenju, who also knew a lot, also let out a sigh of relief. It seemed like she didn't want to stay in this place that was destined to become hostile. As for Tina, although she wasn't sure why the celestial maiden of chrysanthemum had come to fairy tale, she could clearly sense that something was wrong with the atmosphere. Thus, under Xiaoshi's lead, Hina and Yenju silently left the reception room and the scene. Mugging and Rintaro had no intention of leaving at all. They followed behind Noah as if they were Noah's bodyguards. They kept staring at the Tenkyo chrysanthemum. To Mugging, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum was his biological grandfather as well as his mortal enemy. To Rintaro, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum was his stepfather as well as his teacher. However, Rintaro's relationship with the Tenkyo chrysanthemum wasn't any better than Muging's. He just didn't hate him as much. Understanding this, Noah didn't force Mugging and Rintaro to leave. He brought them to the Tenkyo chrysanthemum and sat down. Time seemed to come to a standstill at this moment, no longer flowing. Apart from Noah, who sat casually on the ground, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum, Mugging, and Rentaro all sat facing each other, making the atmosphere very tense. After maintaining this uncomfortable silence for a full 5 minutes, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum still didn't open his eyes. However, he spoke in a hoarse voice without emotion. Before this, I never thought that I would come to this shelter. With that one sentence, the tense atmosphere had completely transitioned to a dangerous direction. Is that so? Noah didn't seem to mind. Then, how do you feel? As you expected. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum finally opened his eyes and cast a sharp gaze on Noah. Even though I've been to many places in my long life and even entered the nests of primitive animals, I still feel that this is the worst place I've ever been. Indeed. As the representative of the plundered generation, who hated the cursed child, fairy tale was a place that the Tenkyo chrysanthemum didn't want to stay in for the rest of his life. Hearing the Tenkyo chrysanthemum's unrestrained comment, Noah smiled. If my territory is liked by people like you, then I'll feel very uncomfortable. It's great to hear you say that. In just 1 or 2 sentences, a dangerous atmosphere that made it hard for people to breathe completely filled the air. Witnessing Noah and the Tenkyo chrysanthemum's unperturbed faces, Mugging and Rentaro's palms began to sweat. They had a full understanding of the terrible relationship between these two. In the past, they knew that Noah and the Tenkyo chrysanthemum's relationship wasn't good. However, both Mugging and Ryudera didn't expect this to be so bad that there was no room for compromise. They were like fire and water. They believed that anyone who witnessed the dangerous confrontation between Noah and the Tenkyo chrysanthemum would be nervous. However, Noah and the Tenkyo chrysanthemum looked calm. Obviously, this kind of confrontation was already a common occurrence for these two people. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum seemed to be tired of this meaningless confrontation. He looked up and turned his gaze to Mugging and Rentaro. You two actually stayed in this place. Rentaro didn't say anything and only met the Tenkyo chrysanthemum's gaze in silence. Mugging narrowed his eyes and revealed a bewitching smile at the Tenkyo chrysanthemum. Long time no see, Your Excellency Tenkyo. I've been missing you all the time. Mugging's words didn't carry any warmth. Instead, they emitted a bone-chilling coldness. Humph, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum lifted his chin with a cold gaze. You know that you can't do anything with your strength, so you came to this place to wag your tail. It's just a coincidence. Mugging smiled without wavering. So, you're overthinking, Your Excellency Tenkyo. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum stared at Mugging's smiling face for a long time. You've learned how to talk glibly after not seeing you for so long. If Your Excellency Tenkyo doesn't like this, I don't mind showing my truest side to you. Mugging slowly withdrew his expression and a cold luster bloomed in his eyes. After all, you also know that I will bury all of the Tenkyo. All of them must die. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum narrowed his eyes and his sharp gaze gradually turned dangerous. No one would have thought that such a conversation was between a grandfather and his granddaughter. And it was precisely because he had a certain level of understanding of the relationship between Mugenko and Chrysanthemum that Rentaro, who had remained silent all this time, felt a chill run down his spine. As the host, Noah just held a cup of tea as though he didn't realize what was happening around him. He sipped his tea and didn't show the slightest impatience. This action made the Tenkyo Chrysanthemum retract his gaze and look at Noah with a meaningful gaze. You're calmer than I thought. Don't you care about my purpose for coming here? I only care if you've accomplished your so-called purpose. Noah continued to sip his tea without even glancing at the Tenkyo Chrysanthemum. If you've accomplished it, then you'd better leave this place quickly. Otherwise, you might not be able to leave at any time. Rentaro, who didn't expect Noah to say such words, couldn't help but be startled. Mugging's eyes flashed and her hand that had been holding the scabbard in her hand tightened. She looked as if she would be the first to rush forward if a fight broke out. You're really unscrupulous. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum stared closely at Noah. Is this how you affect the Holy Son of Heaven? The Holy Son of Heaven. Mugging and Rintaro were stunned. Noah's hand movements paused slightly. He raised his head and met the Tenkyo chrysanthemum's gaze. After a while, he smiled inexplicably. What's wrong? Did you fall out of favor with the princess? I heard that you've been accompanying the Holy Son of Heaven as a guard during the time I left the Tokyo area. You even forced Chiwu Zhongshuan back to the Osaka area. The Tenkyo chrysanthemum ignored Noah's ridicule and continued to speak. Since then, the Holy Son of Heaven has changed. He seems to be more active in participating in the political power than before. Even the part that I usually assist also participated in, which surprised me very much. When Mugging and Rintaro looked at each other, Noah raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. In other words, you've really fallen out of favor with the princess. Because the previous rulers have always been immature and controlled most of the political power. Now, the immature rulers have finally begun to grow and finally began to declare their sovereignty. So, you, who feel that your position has become precarious, are afraid and can only come to me to find the reason. However, just as this sentence fell, the Tenkyo chrysanthemum unexpectedly showed an angry expression. Stop talking nonsense. Chapter 147. The sudden roar of the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime, stunned everyone present, including Noah. Although the Holy Son of Heaven is indeed immature, she is the only one in the history of the Holy Son of Heaven that I respect. Only she can be called a true wise ruler. Chrysanthemum Prime lost his composure. I am happier than anyone that she can grow up. Even if she can stand alone one day, I will still stand behind her and assist her. As he said that, Chrysanthemum Prime's eyes seemed to be burning with raging flames. There was not a trace of hypocrisy in them, which told Noah and the others that these words were completely from his heart. Although it surprised Noah, Mugging, and Rintaro, this old man seemed to really respect and love the current Holy Son of Heaven. This couldn't be faked. Since the growth of the princess not only didn't make you feel threatened, but you are also proud of it, then why are you still saying this? Noah frowned. Isn't it your purpose to come here to investigate the reason why the princess changed? This is indeed my purpose, but what I care about is why the Holy Son of Heaven changed like this. Chrysanthemum Prime calmed down again with a solemn expression. What did you do to make the Holy Son of Heaven change like this? What did I do? Noah suddenly smiled. Do you think I would deliberately do something to change the princess? Hearing this, the celestial child Chrysanthemum Prime Minister fell silent. His confrontation with Noah had lasted for more than a year. Facing this opponent who came out of nowhere, Chrysanthemum Celestial Child felt that he knew a lot about Noah. Therefore, Chrysanthemum Prime also knew that Noah wasn't the kind of person who would deliberately do something behind his back while he was away from Tokyo. Alas, Chrysanthemum Prime had personally witnessed the Heavenly Prince breaking away from his support and wanting to be on his own. Sage Son of Heaven didn't change like this when he left Tokyo, but when he returned, Sage Son of Heaven had changed. During this period of time, Noah had been accompanying Sage Son of Heaven as a guard. It was no wonder that Chrysanthemum would think that Noah had done something. Of course, not doing anything on purpose didn't mean that Noah would do nothing. At the very least, the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime believed that this change was entirely due to Noah. I only said some self-righteous words, Noah said casually as if he had seen through Chrysanthemum Prime Minister's mind. Other than that, I haven't done anything, and I won't do anything. Self-righteous words. Chrysanthemum Prime pondered for a bit before speaking. Haven't you ever thought of gaining the trust of the Holy Son of Heaven and using it to climb up the ranks and fulfill your wish? Noah raised his eyes and looked at Chrysanthemum Prime Minister like an arrow. His eyes gradually turned cold. What do you mean by this? Haven't you always wanted the monsters you raised to live the life of an ordinary person? Ignoring Noah's ice-cold gaze, the celestial child Chrysanthemum Prime spoke in an extremely calm tone, as if he was narrating something. If you can climb up the ranks with the help of the Holy Son of Heaven, with your means, you will definitely achieve great things, right? Hearing such words and looking straight at Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, Noah suddenly laughed, and it was an extremely sarcastic kind. Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, we have been in contact for more than a year. In your opinion, do I look like someone who needs to climb up the ranks to achieve my goal? Chrysanthemum Prime Minister's expression changed imperceptibly. Even Mugging and Rintaro, who were quietly listening to the two, glanced at each other. It had to be said that Noah's statement was very arrogant. However, this was also the truth. Up until this second, Noah was not a person with a great background in the political arena. He was not even a person with an extremely shocking background or status. Noah was nothing more than the leader of a police organization that was spontaneously formed in the form of himself. This kind of identity was equivalent to the chairman of a private company. It might be very prestigious internally, but outside, it just gave people a feeling of a little reputation. There was no way to compare with those who occupied a seat in the political arena, and there was no way to compare with the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. However, even so, Noah was still able to defeat the ruler of the Osaka region, causing the highest assistant in the Tokyo region, except for the Son of Heaven, to have a headache for more than a year, hitting a wall one after another. How could such a person's words be untrustworthy? Not to mention Mugging and Rintaro, even Chrysanthemum Prime Minister did not dare to go against his will to deny Noah's ability. For a moment, he could not find the words to refute. The air in the entire reception room seemed to have become heavy, making Mugging and Rintaro, who were silently watching the battle, feel very depressed. After a long time, Chrysanthemum Prime Minister spoke. Why would you want to shelter such a group of monsters? Chrysanthemum Prime Minister finally asked the question that had been in his heart for more than a year. I will never forget the day 10 years ago when the world fell into the abyss of despair. Humans were forced into a dead end and were almost exiled from this world. Now, those monsters with the blood of the culprit in their bodies are laughing loudly beside you. How can you still protect them so righteously? Didn't you see the scene of the people around you being eaten up when you were a child? Didn't you see the world that could be called the end of the world? Don't tell me you don't suspect that your parents and friends were eaten by those monsters when you're all alone. At this moment, Chrysanthemum Prime Minister seemed to have found an outlet to vent the hatred in his heart. His expression was slightly terrifying, his eyes were slightly crazed, and his voice became lower and lower. Do you have to wait until those children with dirty blood turn into monsters in front of you and eat the people around you one by one before you wake up and realize that you are raising a group of monsters? Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, whose voice was getting louder and louder, did not see that Noah's gaze on him had already turned into complete pity. Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, Noah said faintly after Chrysanthemum Prime Minister finished venting with great difficulty. I used to think that you were a character, but now it seems that you are just like those ordinary people outside. You are just an ugly human with a dark side. What do you mean? Chrysanthemum Prime Minister's eyes were filled with malice. What's wrong with what I said? Indeed, it's just as you said. Those children all have the blood of protozoa flowing in their bodies, and they also carry the protozoa virus. Noah's indifferent gaze swept over Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. However, between a group of children whose bodies are dirty but whose hearts are pure, and a group of people who appear to be humans on the surface but actually resent others when they stand in their way, have fierce eyes when they are threatened, and have evil intentions when they are robbed of their things, who is more like a monster? As Noah spoke, Chrysanthemum Prime Minister's eyes grew crazier and crazier, but his expression gradually returned to calmness. It was like the calm before a suppressed volcano that was about to erupt. The celestial Chrysanthemum Minister stood up and looked down at Noah from above. As expected, Noah Dole, there is no possibility of peaceful coexistence between us. I feel the same. Noah also stood up and glanced sideways at Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. You are a monster in human skin but only have a dark side in your heart. I must protect the monster in your eyes, so only one of us can survive. Chrysanthemum Prime expressionlessly raised his foot and walked past Noah, heading towards the door. If I have the chance, I will kill you. With his back to the celestial child Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, Noah said the same thing. If I have the chance, I will kill you. Leaving behind this conversation that was equivalent to a declaration of war and falling out, Noah and the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime, didn't say anything else. One of them sat down and continued to drink tea, while the other walked out without looking back and disappeared. The scene returned to calm. Chapter 148. Phew! In the reception room, Mugging and Rintaro, who had been holding their breath for some time, couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief the moment the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister left. Only then did Mugging and Rintaro realize that because of the extremely dangerous atmosphere and dangerous conversation between Noah and the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, they were already so nervous that their backs were covered in sweat. Just now, Mugging and Rintaro witnessed Noah and the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister officially declaring war on each other, and from then on, they would become complete enemies. In this regard, Mugging and Rintaro had different reactions. Mugging was even more excited, as if her adrenaline had been completely stimulated. It made people feel that the person who just declared war on the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister was not Noah, but herself. Rintaro, on the other hand, was full of hesitation. Looking at Noah, who was leisurely drinking tea as if nothing had happened, he spoke with some concern. That old man is the assistant of the Holy Son of Heaven in Tokyo. Is it really okay for you to directly declare war on him? What's wrong with that? Noah waved his hand as if nothing had happened. Anyway, sooner or later, I will go to this step with that old man. We both know that we can't tolerate each other. In the past, we have been making things difficult for each other. Undoubtedly, we are just putting things on the table for nothing. There's no difference. Then, do you really plan to kill the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister? Rintaro looked at Noah with a dignified expression. He is the pillar of the entire Tentong family. The Tentong family's influence in Tokyo is not ordinary. Even the Holy Son of Heaven has no way to punish him. I have fully experienced these things in the past year. You don't need to tell me. Noah glanced at Rintaro. Do you think that if I am not prepared to bring down the entire Tentong family, I will declare war on that old man? Rintaro recalled that last time, Noah had asked Muri for some evidence of some of the Tentong family's political figures doing illegal things behind the scenes. Come to think of it, since that time, Noah had already planned to deal with the celestial Tong family. However, as the adopted son of the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, Rintaro felt that this matter was not so optimistic. In the past, when Rintaro was still the adopted son of the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister intended to train Rintaro to become a politician. Because of this, Rintaro had followed the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister to various occasions more than once. Thus, he had a thorough understanding of the Tentong family's power. In Rintaro, Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister had no way to deal. Chrysanthemum Prime Chrysanthemum, Tentong Chrysanthemum, Tentong Chrysanthemum, Rhinum Prime S is also, Chrysanthemum, he Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum. Therefore, the declaration of war between Noah and the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister was only the beginning of a long tug-of-war between the two. Rintaro, I know what you are thinking, but the conflict between me and that old man can't be mediated. Noah sighed faintly. I didn't ask you to take sides and help me deal with the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. You don't have to worry. Rintaro breathed a sigh of relief. Although Rintaro didn't have a good impression of the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, the other party was also his stepfather. If he had to deal with the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, even if there was no burden in his heart, it would still be very stressful. When necessary, Rintaro didn't mind helping Noah. However, if he was completely involved in the struggle between the two, Rintaro didn't have the confidence to keep up with the footsteps of these two opponents who were very terrifying in all aspects. Because of this, Rintaro didn't consider staying out of the matter, but he still had the idea of avoiding as much trouble as possible. However, just as Rintaro made such a decision, Mugging suddenly sat in front of Noah and looked at Noah with a serious expression. "Then, how about letting me help you?" Noah's action of drinking tea suddenly paused. "Mugen-san." Rintaro looked at Mugging in a daze, but when he saw Mugging sitting in front of Noah with an unquestionable expression, Rintaro knew that Mugging had also made up her mind. Rintaro was speechless. "Help me?" Noah pondered for a moment and looked at Mugging in front of him. "What do you mean?" "Although I am very unwilling, the Tentong Chrysanthemum Prime Minister is right." Mugging clenched the scabbard of her tachi with a face full of unwillingness. "If I want to deal with the entire Tentong family, it's unlikely that I can do anything with my own strength." Noah more or less understood the meaning and said with relief. "So, you plan to borrow my strength? You plan to deal with the Tentong family, I also plan to deal with them." Mugging looked at Noah with a pair of bright eyes. "In that case, wouldn't it be better to let me help you?" From Mugging's expression, Noah and Rintaro both saw traces of life and death coexisting. Mugung had always hated the entire Tiantong family. He had always set his survival goal to bury the entire Tiantong family, so he had lived until now. However, just as Mugging said, Muging's individual strength was too insignificant to deal with the Tentong family. With no other choice, Mugging could only hide and quietly wait for an opportunity, waiting for the time to come for revenge. Now, Mugging finally saw hope in dealing with the Tentong family from Noah. This made Muging's heart suddenly become active, and her face naturally showed anger. As for the death aura, it was the specific manifestation of the hatred in Muging's heart. Simply put, because she saw the hope of revenge, the dark side of Muging's heart that was filled with hatred suddenly overflowed. "If you agree, this body and this sword will become yours." Mugging held the scabbard and held it horizontally in front of her and Noah. Her eyes and face were full of seriousness. "Tentong Mugging will become the sharpest sword in your hand, cutting off all the obstacles in front of you." "Miss Mugging." Rintaro couldn't help but call out. In the end, after calling out, he couldn't say a word. Noah stared at Mugging in front of him. His dark and deep eyes gradually flickered with a thoughtful arc. After a while, he said, "So. Even if I let you do the kidney transplant now?" Mugging was suddenly stunned. The seriousness on her pretty face turned into hesitation. This time, Rintaro's eyes lit up. Muging's kidney had always been problematic. This was something that people who were more familiar with Mugging knew. However, very few people knew that Mugging could actually do a kidney transplant to cure her old illness. It was just that Mugging had always refused to accept it. From the past until now, who knew how many years had passed? Now that Mugging suddenly changed her mind, of course she would hesitate. "This," Mugging said hesitantly. "This shouldn't have anything to do with dealing with the Tentong family, right? Did you forget what I said last time?" Noah folded his arms. "Your current body can't support your long-term activities at all. Because of this, you can't even be active at the front line. If a great opportunity to deal with the Tentong family appears when you can't move, what should you do? You said that you want to help me deal with the Tentong family. I can agree, but your kidney problem is a burden. I don't want you to lie in the hospital for hemodialysis when I need you." Noah chuckled. "So, you have to accept the kidney transplant to ensure that you won't become a burden. Only then will I accept your proposal." Mugging was at a loss for words. Her face was full of struggle. You said before that the reason why you didn't accept the kidney transplant was because you were afraid that you would forget about dealing with the Tentong family. You wouldn't be able to entrust your hatred to them. But now, even if you forget your hatred, I'll definitely deal with the Tentong family. Noah shrugged. Since I'll definitely deal with the Tentong family, then let me be the entrusting of your hatred. Entrusting. Mugging stared at Noah in a daze. Her eyes fluctuated. Noah didn't speak again. Rintaro stared at Mugging. Both of them were quietly waiting for Mugging's decision. After a while, Mugging took a deep breath and made her decision. Chapter 149. The smell of disinfectant permeated the air, bringing with it an extremely pungent smell. In the cold corridor, Noah and Rintaro sat on a bench and stared at the door in front of them. It was the door of one of the hospital's operating rooms. At this time, the door was tightly shut and the red light that indicated surgery was still on, indicating what kind of work was going on inside. Noah and Rintaro had been sitting there for quite some time. While waiting, the two of them didn't have a proper conversation. Of course, it wasn't that Noah and Rintaro didn't want to talk. It was just that Rintaro's current state made it impossible for them to maintain a normal conversation. Noah turned his head and looked at Rintaro, who was so nervous that he began to sweat. He shook his head helplessly. Rintaro, can you not be so nervous? Okay. Rintaro looked as if his soul had left his body. His forehead was still dripping with sweat. I know. Although he said that, Rintaro didn't seem to have any intention of relaxing. He even clasped his hands together tightly. Noah began to wonder if Rintaro had heard him. There's no point in being so nervous. Noah could only try to persuade him. The doctor said that with the medical standards in Tokyo, the success rate of this operation is very high. There's basically no risk. Why are you so nervous? You're right. Rintaro let out a long sigh. But I can't help it if I'm still nervous. You're right. Noah nodded his head in distress. Why don't you find something to talk about and I'll talk to you about it? Is that so? Rintaro pondered for a moment and said. Thank you. Noah couldn't help but be stunned by such a brainless thank you. What are you doing? If it weren't for you, Miss Mugging's problem might not have been solved. Rintaro seemed to be immersed in the topic. He clasped his hands and his eyes flickered slightly. Actually, Miss Mugging's kidney problem didn't just affect her body. I suspect that it even affected Miss Mugging's mind. Affected the mind? Noah was surprised. What do you mean? Ryutaro hesitated for a moment before speaking. Didn't you notice that Miss Mugging's behavior was too abnormal when she talked about the hatred with the Tiantong family? Abnormal. Noah could not help but recall Mugging's various past performances. Indeed, Mugging is completely different when he talks about the Tiantong clan. But that's also because he hates the Tiantong clan, right? If only that was the case. Ryutaro laughed bitterly. I have a friend who told me that Miss Mugging's mental state is very abnormal when she talks about the Tiantong family. Even her temperament changes, which is very puzzling. Therefore, she feels that Miss Mugging is likely to have mental hallucinations due to the kidney pain. Specifically, it should be that she can see her dead parents forcing her to take revenge. After hearing Ryutaro's words, Noah also had some doubts. In the past, Mugging's temperament would obviously change when she talked about the Tiantong family. The dark aura that resembled a malicious spirit that crawled back from the abyss had made Noah frown more than once. Now, after hearing Ryutaro's words, it was very likely that there was a mental problem. Perhaps Miss Mugging is also aware of this, which is why she refused to undergo the kidney transplant? Ryutaro sighed. After all, once the kidney transplant is completed, Miss Mugging is very likely to no longer see that kind of hallucination. Without the phantom of her dead parents forcing her to take revenge, she is very likely to forget the hatred. Therefore, she must rely on the pain and hallucinations to make herself remember the hatred. This is probably what Miss Mugging's inner thoughts are. Noah nodded heavily, his expression somewhat relaxed. In that case, you should be happy now, right? That's why I'm thanking you. Ryotaro also smiled lightly. To be honest, I really don't want to see Miss Mugging showing her hatred openly. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. Noah also felt a little sympathetic. Noah himself did not object to Mugging taking revenge. It would be better to say that his family was murdered. If it were Noah, he would definitely seek revenge at all costs. However, he had to be particular about how he should take revenge. At the very least, Noah could not become the kind of person who would do anything for revenge. In this regard, Mugging had shown the tendency to take revenge by any means necessary. Therefore, even if Noah did not object to Mugging taking revenge, he was very uncomfortable with Mugging's ghost-like dark side when she talked about revenge in the past. If this kidney transplant could solve this problem, it would not be a bad thing. Ding! At this moment, with a soft sound, the red light that represented the operation dimmed, and the door of the operating theater was opened. A few doctors in white coats walked out of the operating theater slowly. Their faces were covered by masks, so their expressions could not be seen clearly, but the relaxation in their eyes could not be concealed. Noah, who saw this clearly, sighed in relief. It seemed that Mugging's surgery would not be a problem. Doctor. Ryotaro had already hurriedly stood up and asked the doctor. How is it? Don't worry, the surgery is very successful. The leading doctor revealed the good news. However, the patient is still under anesthesia, and will probably wake up at night. It's best to stay in the hospital for a period of time and observe the patient's physical condition at all times. Got it. Noah shook hands with the chief surgeon. Thank you, doctor. The doctor immediately exchanged a few pleasantries, and then left the scene with the rest of the people. Noah and Ryotaro looked at each other, smiled, and walked into the operating theater. Tokyo District 1, Sacred Residence. Under the Sacred Residence, the door of the National Defense Operations Headquarters was forcefully opened. The Sacred Son of Heaven quickly walked into the room. There, all the officials and the assistant Tentong Chrysanthemum stood up from the conference table together. The Sacred Son of Heaven immediately reached out and asked everyone to sit down, and looked at the Tentong Chrysanthemum with a serious expression. What happened? Yes. The Tentong Chrysanthemum nodded. At 21:30 today, an unknown number of primitive animals appeared near Monolith 32 and attacked the self-defense forces. The Sacred Son of Heaven could not help but tighten his arms. Monolith, a protozoan has appeared near the monolith. That was simply impossible. After all, other than stage V protozoa, there shouldn't be any other protozoa that would approach the monolith. The Tentong Chrysanthemum did not say anything, and turned his body to show the screen behind him to the Sacred Son of Heaven. This is an image taken by a member of the self-defense forces who was killed. The Sacred Son of Heaven quickly narrowed his eyes and looked at the screen. On the screen, an overly blurry picture was displayed. It was a picture taken in the dark. In the photo, on the monolith that was darker than the night sky, a giant protozoan with only its head exposed from the darkness was attached to the monolith when it entered the range of the photo. Looking at the primitive animal attached to the monolith in the picture, the Sacred Son of Heaven seemed to have thought of something. This primitive animal seems to be somewhere. Halfway through his sentence, the Sacred Son of Heaven found the primitive animal's figure and information related to this figure in his memory. His pupils shrunk, and he covered his mouth. Stage IV's Aldebaran. The entire conference room suddenly became silent, and then panic ensued. Aldebaran. Isn't that a primitive animal with the ability to resist erosion? In the midst of the panic, the sacred Son of Heaven also rubbed his hands out of fear. Why would Stage 4 appear? Why would it be able to come to Monolith? No matter how hard he thought, the sacred Son of Heaven could not get a clear answer. But there was one thing that was certain. Something big was going to happen in Tokyo. Chapter 150. In the corridors of the holy residence that were as white and smooth as ivory, Noah directly passed many guards who brushed past him and walked forward with a serious expression on his face. In the holy abode, many guards saw Noah in a hurry and wanted to question him. However, when they recognized who he was, their faces turned green and they ran away in panic. Obviously, there was no one in the holy abode who did not recognize Noah. This was because Noah had entered and exited the holy abode more than once during the Holy Sun's attack. He had even taught a lesson to the arrogant holy abode's guards led by Bao Wei Zhuoren. Bao Wei Zhuoren had even been beaten to a pulp. In addition, many people in the holy abode had witnessed Noah entering and exiting the Holy Sun's room freely. Therefore, rumors of Noah's relationship with the Holy Sun had already spread throughout the holy abode. Otherwise, why was the former captain of the holy abode's guards, Bao Wei Zhuoren, beaten up by Noah for no reason? Why was Noah not punished? Otherwise, why would the arrogant holy abode's guards, who had worked for the Holy Sun for almost 10 years, be dismissed overnight? Wasn't it because the guards of the holy abode offended Noah, and the Holy Son of Heaven supported Noah, so the guards of the holy abode, led by the Holy Son of Heaven, were fired? Therefore, even though Noah himself did not know about this, Noah had become the number one person in the holy abode that they could not afford to offend. Therefore, when Noah suddenly came to visit and barged into the holy abode, no one stopped him or questioned him. Noah did not pay much attention to this. This was because Noah was puzzled. As Mu Gung had just undergone a kidney transplant yesterday, Noah and Rentaro had stayed in the hospital to take care of Mu Gung. They only heaved a sigh of relief when Mu Gung woke up this morning. However, before Noah and Rentaro could wake up from their stupor, Mugging, who seemed to be in good spirits, suddenly called Noah's phone. The caller was none other than the Elysian Emperor himself. The Holy Son of Heaven did not mention the purpose of the call. He only used an extremely low voice to invite Noah to the holy residence. Sensing that something was amiss, Noah did not refuse. Even though he was filled with questions, he still accepted the Elysian Emperor's invitation. After leaving Mogan in Rentaro's care, he headed straight for the Elysian Emperor's residence. However, when they arrived at the holy residence, Noah realized that the atmosphere in the holy residence was inexplicably tense. Some people carried on with their work in an orderly manner as usual. However, there were some who clearly had a gloomy and nervous look on their faces. It was obvious that they had a lot on their minds, and their faces were full of ugly expressions. Furthermore, the holy residence was much livelier than before. Many officials who seemed to hold important positions were entering and exiting the sacred residence with anxious expressions. This was also the reason why the atmosphere in the sacred residence was so tense. Noah's intuition told him that something big must have happened. At that moment, Noah narrowed his eyes and quickened his pace. He arrived in front of the Elysian Emperor's room and pushed open the door. President Noah. The moment the fragrance of the Elysian Emperor's room entered Noah's nose, the Elysian Emperor, who was sitting on the sofa in the spacious room, stood up and looked at Noah. Her usually pure and holy face was filled with haze. Noah frowned slightly and walked into the Elysian Emperor's room. He was no stranger to her now, so he sat down in front of her and looked at her. Since the situation is urgent, let's make it short. Not only did such a condescending and abrupt speech not make the Elysian Emperor unhappy, but because of Noah's usual forceful attitude, her expression became much better. Then please allow me to make a concise explanation. With this sentence as the opening statement, the Elysian Emperor explained. As the Elysian Emperor's words unfolded, Noah's expression became more and more surprised. In the end, his eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Aldebaran. This was the identification code of a very famous, Stage 4, protozoan. Noah had also learned of its existence from some sketchy records. Among the 11, Zodiac, Stage V, so far, 3 have been confirmed to have been destroyed. He was killed by the number 1 IP, the world's strongest, initiator, who was once considered to be invincible, who brought fear to mankind, and who also led an entire army of protozoa, Taurus. They were killed by the German, initiator, who was ranked second on the IP list, Virgo. Then, it was the Scorpio that was killed by Noah. Not long ago, everyone in the Tokyo area witnessed his body being smashed to pieces. And, Aldebaran, was one of the members of Taurus' army, an ancient protozoan that would often appear together with Taurus. Because Taurus was one of the very few, Stage V, protozoans that would act in groups, Aldebaran was equivalent to its left and right hand. Therefore, people used the brightest star in Taurus as the identification code of this protozoan. Of course, this was not only because Aldebaran was the left and right hand of Taurus, but also because Aldebaran had a special ability. The ability to corrode. That was definitely a human's nightmare. In other words, Tokyo's number 32, monolith, was attacked by Aldebaran last night, and was also injected with lithium corrosive fluid. Noah sorted out the information he got from Xingzi, and slowly raised his head. So, in another 6 days, the entire monolith will collapse due to erosion and widening, and the protozoa will invade the Tokyo area en masse, leading to the extinction of the Tokyo area, right? Xingzi nodded his head with a heavy face, and after a while, he pulled himself together and said, "The production of the new monolith has already been put on the schedule since yesterday, but it will take at least 9 days to complete." 9 days. Noah muttered as he bit his fingernails. In 6 days, the monolith will collapse and the protozoans will invade Tokyo, and in 9 days, the new monolith will be completed. So, in the middle 3 days, the invasion of the protozoans must be stopped, and the Tokyo area will be spared. Soon, the whitening of the monolith will be exposed to the public, and at that time, the entire Tokyo area will usher in unimaginable chaos. Xingzi prayed with his hands clasped in front of his chest, eyes closed, and a compassionate look on his face. Although there is a deep underground bunker in the Tokyo area that can serve as a shelter for the people, it can only hold 30% of the people, and the food inside can only last everyone for 2 months. If the protozoans invaded Tokyo, 70% of the people in Tokyo would become food for the protozoans. And the remaining 30% of the people, even if they survived by relying on the underground shelter, if there is no rescue within 2 months, they will all be finished. Unless a large number of protozoans can be stopped during the 3 days between the collapse of the old monolith and the completion of the new monolith, or else, such a desperate situation will befall the entire Tokyo area. Now, the subordinate officials are also gathering capable police companies in the form of an auxiliary force They are preparing to fight the protozoan army together with the self-defense forces in 6 days. Xingzi raised his head and looked directly at Noah, his eyes full of hope. "I just want to ask you, President Noah, can the bullet you have saved the Tokyo area?" Hearing this, Noah finally understood the purpose of Xingzi personally inviting him to discuss this matter. Bullet. Xingzi wants to pin his hopes on the bullet that can kill the Stage V protozoans, and he intends to use the power of the bullet to eliminate the protozoans that are about to invade Tokyo. Noah chose to be silent. In Noah's heart, an inexplicable warning sign was rolling. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.